point. Madam Clerk, would you please go through the procedure for the public hearing this evening and for second and third reading, and then we'll begin our process. Madam Clerk, you have the microphones on.
Thank you. Welcome to the July 23rd, 2024 City of Beaumont public hearing on Bylaw 1055-24 Land Use Bylaw Amending Bylaw. Public hearings are an opportunity to speak to council on advertised bylaws or certain resolutions. I'll spend a few moments providing an overview of the public hearing procedures as provided in our meeting procedures Bylaw 1014-22 and going over some changes as a result of provincial legislation changes. We have been accepting written submissions in the weeks preceding the public hearing. The deadline for written submissions was noon on July 22nd, 2024. We did receive one written submission and it has been distributed to council and made available to the public in advance of the public hearing this evening. All written submissions received by the deadline have been provided to council in advance of this hearing for their review and are also available for public inspection on the agenda page of the city's website. Registration to present at the public hearing by electronic means was required by 4:00 p.m. on July 22nd, 2024. Registration to present in person is permitted in advance of the public hearing or here today at the public hearing. Mayor Daniluk, so far we have one speaker for today's public hearing. The speaker is in person today and we do not have anyone participating by electronic means. The procedure for public hearings is as follows. Administration will first make a presentation on Bylaw 1055-24. Next, members of the public who are registered to speak or those who are present here will be invited to make their respective presentations. If anyone here has not yet registered to speak and would like to do so, please raise your hand and we will get your name added to our list of presenters. Council will first hear from those who are in favor of the bylaw and then those who are opposed, and then anyone else who wishes to be heard. Presenters will have up to 5 minutes to present and council will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification. When it is your turn to make your presentation, please ensure your microphone or audio is working and state your full name for the record before beginning your presentation. Your 5 minutes will start when your presentation starts, and we will notify you as the 5 minutes draws to a close. Please remain at the mic once you are done presenting, since council may ask you questions following your presentation. Recent changes in legislation, specifically the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, provides that a council may hold only one public hearing on each proposed bylaw that considers residential developments or developments with residential and non-residential developments. Once council has heard all the public hearing presentations, administration recommends that the meeting procedures bylaw be suspended to allow council to discuss bylaw 1055-24 prior to closing the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed and the regular session of council reconvenes, council may proceed with second and third reading. On a final note, the city's public hearings are recorded as a webcast, which will be made available for viewing on the city's website. Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. And we'll just register this lady here. Your name is? With respect to bylaw 1055-24. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Sorry. You're here to speak about something else beside the bylaw?
Yeah, I did send an email by bounce, but that's okay.
Okay, well, we've already passed that part of the meeting on open forum. We can go back. Do we need to suspend our meeting? We've already passed a part of our agenda. Can we go back to open forum, or we have to do something formal, Madam Clerk, to go back on our agenda to open forum? What is easier for us to do? So we can speak, have our residents speak.
We can go back to the agenda item if council agrees to do that.
Okay, I see no consensus to the contrary, so would you please join us at the table, if you could, please? We'll go back to item 3 on our agenda, open forum. You're welcome to join us here in a moment. I'll just give you the lowdown how this works. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please then enter and speak your name and the topic of your discussion, and then you can speak for 5 minutes and we'll ask some questions of you, okay? So welcome to council, and please begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Greetings. My name is Dr. Cheryl Okoli. I'm new to Beaumont, and I basically just came to introduce myself to you and to just let you know, like, if you need any assistance in the healthcare arena, that I'm very welcome to. I'm happy to provide my services to the Beaumont community. And if you have any questions specifically to ask of me, I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Well, that was very pleasant. How nice. Oh,
Yeah,
Open
and I
forum's
should
always a-
specify, I'm not a medical doctor, but I have a doctorate in health administration.
okay, good, great.
Okay.
Most open forums are a little more contentious than that. So very much, well, welcome to Beaumont.
Thank
How
you.
recently have you arrived?
I beg your
How
pardon?
recently have you arrived to Beaumont?
June 28th
Okay, so
officially.
you're very new. Okay, well, welcome to Beaumont. We do
Thank you.
appreciate you coming to our great little city here. So we'll take your information. I'll reach out to you with an email to say, we'll have a cup of coffee sometime. We can talk about that. But
Sounds good.
again, welcome to Beaumont. We do appreciate having more medical assistance here. And again, administrative capacity is very much welcome. So
Thank
any
you.
questions, members of council, we'll simply say welcome and we'll continue with our agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in. You're welcome to stay if you like.
Yeah, I will sit.
Sure,
Thank
no
you.
problem. Okay, no problem at all. So we'll go back to then the 6.1. Madam Clerk has outlined the procedure. And as you know, Council Bill 20 has made a significant change in the process for public hearings. Our process in the past has been to have a public hearing. And if from that public hearing, member council in the debate phase decides to make a change to the bylaw and sends it back to administration, then a subsequent public hearing would happen down the road. The new rules have suspended that. So it's a little different procedure this evening. So it may be a little clunky at first. And if I'm not sure proceeding, I will call a short recess and make sure I get the procedure right. We only get one chance to get it right tonight. And we'll make sure we do exactly that. So bear with me for that if you don't mind. So at this point, I will invite administration to make their presentation to us on bylaw 1055-24. Ms. Raymond, I believe you're presenting with Ms. Foley as well. Ms. Raymond, I'll just find you. Are you gonna say there? You come to the front. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just find a microphone for you. Just give me a second, find the right one. Yeah, your microphone is on now. Okay, Ms. Raymond, when you're ready.
You.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. So my name is Kendra Raymond, Director of Planning and Development, and with me here at the end of the table, we have Loretta Foley, Strategic Advisor, Planning and Development, here to present Bylaw 1055-24, Land Use Bylaw Amending Bylaw. Livable communities don't just happen. They're cultivated through careful planning and dedicated care, making sure every duck is right where it needs to be. This bylaw amendment is a thoughtful tweak to our land use bylaw and is a fine-tuning of our neighborhoods to keep our community thriving. This bylaw aligns our regulatory framework with the city's development plans, 25-year vision, and market trends, preserves affordability by continuing to provide choices for meeting the housing needs of our residents, and enhance the overall quality of life. Since January 2022, administration has been exploring matters related to how additional dwelling units and parking are regulated in the city. We began with examining the feasibility and impacts of adding additional parking restrictions for business uses and additional dwelling units in current residential zones. We looked at the feasibility and impact of limiting the number of dwelling units per parcel to a maximum of 2 suites for single-family homes where no detached garage was included, and a maximum of 3 suites for single-family homes where a detached garage was included. And then we also looked at an overview of our standards that we use for home-based businesses, minor and major, including the types of businesses that were typically presented in each category. And so that information was brought to council in January. Following that, council directed administration to continue our research into parking restrictions and ADU allowances in residential neighborhoods. So from April to September 2022, work was undertaken by Intelligent Futures and administration to provide a report addressing these parking and additional dwelling unit considerations. As part of that work, we did an online survey. We had a phone and engagement line. We held internal and external focus groups. We had a project website, and we had presence at city events to be able to talk about the different issues with the community. Following that, we then brought this report to council, committee of the whole, in November and December. Council talked at length about this report and ultimately passed a motion to explore 8 items, which were addressing congestion of street parking and encouraging parking in garages and alleviating street congestion, limiting additional dwelling units for front attached garage product to 1, limiting additional dwelling units for rear detached garage product to 2, and requiring 1 to be a garage suite, disallowing further zero lot line homes, disallowing further tiny homes or mobile homes, adjusting the amount of parking for additional dwelling units to 1 parking stall per bedroom, and limiting the number of business-related vehicles allowed for home-based businesses. ISL undertook an evaluation of these options, including background research and more public engagement, culminating in a report that was provided to Council on September 5th, 2023, where Council passed a motion directing administration to prepare amendments to the land use bylaw to reduce the number of dwelling units in primarily residential districts and create regulations to help improve parking in new neighborhoods. This is the bylaw being considered by Council tonight. These amendments are in attachment 1 of the report and will be discussed in more detail through our presentation tonight. The first amendment we wish to discuss is dwelling units. This table reflects the current maximum density regulations in our land use bylaw. Bylaw 1055-24 proposes to reduce the number of dwelling units allowed per lot to a maximum of 3 in the agricultural holdings, conventional neighborhood, integrated neighborhood district, and mature neighborhood districts. The land use bylaw continues to support a broad range of residential uses that vary in scale and intensity in our integrated neighborhood and mature neighborhood districts, from low density residential to low rise apartment buildings or 3 to 4 stories. Therefore, we've worded the maximum in these 2 districts specifically so that it is 3 dwelling units per lot, or as per the applicable land use in the guiding statutory plan for the neighborhood. While this is a reduction in allowable density on a single lot, this still aligns with our regulatory frameworks, including our affordable housing strategy and our municipal development plan. Beaumont continues to be supportive of ADUs, or additional dwelling units, because they help utilize land and infrastructure wisely and efficiently by maximizing or capitalizing on planned and existing municipal infrastructure and its ongoing operation and maintenance by utilizing existing capacity prior to consideration for expansion or extension of services to new areas. This reduces future infrastructure costs to the city and taxpayers. They provide a range of housing opportunities to address affordability concerns and aging in place. They help homeowners qualify for their mortgages and supplement their income. We need to ensure that talent is able to find employment close to where they live. Employers are reporting that it is difficult to attract and retain workers because they can't afford to live here, and eventually they find a job closer to where they live, which leaves employers struggling for suitably qualified workers. Additional dwelling units also provide opportunities for gentle density and enabling people of all ages and incomes to have housing options in our beautiful community. Reducing the number of dwelling units allowed on 1 parcel may potentially reduce new assessment growth revenue generated from these units being added to properties. As there are currently no properties in the city that have 4 dwelling units, the impact of this adjustment is considered immaterial to the city's budget. Bylaw 1055-24 contains 1 housekeeping amendment that's being proposed by administration, that is to rename zero side yard or zero lot line as single side yard throughout the bylaw to reduce confusion amongst the general public regarding this type of housing product. We can all understand what semi-detached means and what that looks like on the ground, or a duplex, but we don't necessarily know what it means when you tell me what a zero lot line house is. So if I tell you it's a single side yard because you only have the 1, which would be shown here, 1 is adjacent to the lot line, and then you have a side yard on 1 side of the house. And that's what we're trying to denote through more plain language through the bylaw. So the next one would be parking changes. We are going to be doing some thoughtful tweaks regarding parking to address challenges of on-street parking congestion in new neighborhoods. So the first change that we're going to be making is introducing block standards for single side yard developments to prevent single side yard front attached garage product from being on both sides of the block. So you can't have this single side yard across the street from another one where you both have front access. That way we will be able to maximize the amount of on-street parking that exists as lots become more narrow. The second one is requiring driveways for front attached garage products to be paired to maximize on-street parking opportunities. So maximizing on-street parking is important to meeting our land use bylaw goals and the community goals as a whole, as it supports parking needs while decreasing impermeable surface on decreasing impermeable surface on private properties to decrease the strain on our stormwater management system, maximize on-site snow storage capacity, and encourage groundwater recharge. I think that could be a new tongue twister if anybody ever wanted to try that one. It also focuses land resources on the highest and best use of land, which is not parking. Parking requirements increase the cost of housing by increasing the land area required, increasing lot costs, and dedicating excess land to parking that may otherwise be used for housing or other high-value uses. Allowing additional dwelling units with existing parking standards, recognizing that parking congestion is a necessary consequence of creating sustainable, resilient, diverse, equitable, and inclusive neighborhoods, which are key regional and municipal goals. On-site parking is expensive. It can cost between $7,000 and $60,000 more due to land costs and maintenance. These costs are ultimately borne by the residents. So in the September 5th, 2023 report, administration identified that driveway locations would be shown on the tentative plan of subdivision with the intent that we would review these plans for conflicts with street trees, lighting, hydrants, utility boxes, and other conflicts in the right-of-way. However, as a result of engagement with our partners in development, administration is proposing that the driveway locations be shown on the engineered drawings for subdivision and that they will be required to be paired where possible. And that aligns with the information that we have at the time and better puts that at the stage where it makes the most amount of sense through the development process. So finally, the process that we've gone through and the next steps. So we're here for our required public hearing underneath the Municipal Government Act, where council needs to have this prior to giving a second and third reading on the bylaw. We've done a public awareness campaign that ran in May of 2024 that was done with social media. We had a website landing page. We had facts and myths are on our website, and information about the amendments was printed in the local newspaper and sent to homeowners in the communique. Overall, the campaign was positive and was a source of truth for the public. Administration circulated the bylaw to industry, and one letter was received in support of the changes and was included in tonight's package. One concern that they did raise there was reducing the number of dwelling units, and considering that council was very tentative in that, I want to point out that the September 2023 report on the 8 options looked at the impacts of reducing dwelling units on our regulatory framework. It looked at the affordable housing strategy, looked at the age-friendly strategy, it looked at the municipal development plan, and it concluded that we're still going to meet the diversity and equity that council aims to achieve through our higher order plans, the vision that you have for this community over the next 25 years, and it increases housing options. I just want to note that one of those things that is an enabler is your land use bylaw. So while we do have a great regulatory framework, one of those things that actually controls what happens on the ground is this very document that we're talking about today. And since 2019, when we brought in the new land use bylaw, we didn't have, I think we had maybe 2 garage suites in Beaumont prior to the new land use bylaw. And in 2022, we had 11. And we're continuing to get more garage suites that are being developed in Beaumont today. I think you're seeing housing diversity that is being enabled through this. It's not necessarily about the amount of additional dwelling units, but about the flexibility and choice you're offering people to make decisions on their own property. So that concludes my presentation. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Raymond. Appreciate that. At this point, we'll ask for any clarifying questions, members of council, before we move on to the public hearing portion of this evening. Are there any questions from members of council for Ms. Raymond from the presentation we just heard? Seeing none? Okay, for clarifying purposes, the public hearing did begin with the clerk's comments, but the public hearing is now open. And at this point, I will invite anyone who wants to speak in favor of the bylaw to come forward to the table in front of council and speak in favor of the bylaw. Please state your name for the record, your address in Beaumont, and begin. You have 5 minutes to present, please.
Am I coming through loud?
Yes, you are.
My name is Anthony Colesmith. I'm a resident in Forest Heights. And I'm speaking in favor of this amendment, but it's reluctant. And I'd like to point out that I don't think it's reluctant.
Okay.
I recognize I'm giving credit where it's due and that it's a step in the right direction, but I don't believe it's sufficient. A comment was made back there about choice. When I moved to Beaumont, we chose to live in a single-family residential neighborhood, and that's what it was when we developed and built. And in 2020, when the new land use bylaw came in, that choice was rendered moot because the rules changed and we're allowed multiple dwelling units. It used to be if you wanted to put in a secondary suite, you'd have to seek permission or at least talk to your neighbor. That was empowering citizens. That's one of the pillars, I believe, and that's gone. I do have some notes here. So I did check these numbers. I'm going to read out some. I'll try to keep it quick. But I had them double checked by some people who are quite knowledgeable. The current land use, it's 35 residential units per net residential hectare. In Colonial Estates currently, if you measure out net residential hectare, it's about 13.8 dwelling units. With a new target of 35, that's 189% increase. So to say that another way, were there 4 homes now today, there would be 7. Now with the 3 dwelling units allowed in each home, that would end up at 28, a 756% increase. If we were to walk it back to the 2 additional dwelling units, that still represents a 567, or 21 homes where there are 4 today, essentially. So yeah, we have parking issues. This was brought up previous. We're starting to see them now. We talked about recommending the placement of driveways be made clear. In some of the developments, mine, for example, the marking of driveways was made clear, and many of them changed, resulting in some ridiculous driveway configurations, which damaged trees, street furniture, made a driveway almost useless for parking and impeded utility access. We talk about impermeable surfaces, and with the change to the setbacks in the current land use bylaw, when we built our house, we had to be a certain distance away from the fence. The new homes have gone up now. They're gigantic homes. They're much closer. Their deck is right on the fence. And they're paving the backyards. So we're concerned about impermeable surfaces, and we've reduced all of the impermeable surface and reduced it to a small patch of front lawn between 2 coupled driveways. Anyway, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I support the change. It's a step in the right direction, but I would like to point out that I still think there's work to be done. And the survey that was conducted by the city did point out that there was a significant majority of the residents who were opposed to the additional dwelling units. And having read the comments, overwhelmingly, they seem to indicate that 1 may be acceptable, where the 2 or 3 were certainly not. Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Please remain in case any questions from members of council for you for your presentation. I do appreciate your reluctant in favor. That was quite interesting. I appreciate your candor with that. Any questions from members of council for our resident presenter? Councilor Telebas.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, and thank you, Anthony, for sharing not only the information, but also your experiences. I think it's really important that everyone understands, you mentioned how you were impacted by this. So I guess just more on that personal level and how potentially all of these additional dwelling units may have a negative or positive impact on you and your family or your neighbors. Are you able to shed a little light as to how either additional dwelling units benefit you and your family or how they negatively impact you?
Yeah, so when we moved in, there was 1 house built and it had an additional dwelling unit. We built and another home was going in. They requested 1. We had to sign the paperwork saying we're okay with it. And then just about all the other ones showed up and they had the extra dwelling units. And we noticed decreased parking, especially around the corners. It's really difficult for my mother-in-law with mobility issues. You know, we park on the driveway. Or try to, and especially with garbage collection and that sort of thing, there's challenges. And around the street, a lot of blind corners now where children are crossing the crosswalk if it's not blocked by a car or a truck. And there's one particular crosswalk where the cars come in quite fast, and with all of the additional vehicles parked on the road, it's very hard to see. And we've witnessed a number of near misses. It is painted, I'm thankful for that, but I am nervous for some of the kids on that crosswalk. And also just a lot of the mess we see with again, the garbage collection and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Anthony. You're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Newkirk, you have a question for our resident presenter? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And just wondering if you're able to comment on what it has looked like for the parking in your neighborhood relative to the changes we made to the community standard bylaw that require setbacks from driveways, corners, crosswalks and such. Is there courteous parking occurring in your area based upon those?
I don't want to be that negative guy, but I am, I guess. No, there isn't courteous parking. There's, despite the setbacks, there's one particular corner. It has a crosswalk, a corner, a driveway, and a fire hydrant. It's continually blocked. A lot of the neighbors have called. One of my neighbors is in a scooter and has difficult getting around. He calls regularly to try and get this addressed, and it's never done. There's a home-based business right next to the crosswalk. Now, the city came and painted some yellow lines next to the crosswalk, but the painted lines aren't actually the width of the setback. So that in itself is confusing, and people park right close or even use the path as a driveway to get into the business. So there's a lot of that as well. Just like you say, lack of the courteous parking, but also it's the volume.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it. And my next, like kind of my follow-up there is what has enforcement looked like for the neighborhood? Because, you know, one of the things that it's important to do is for residents, although frustrated, is to bring that up with bylaw. And yeah, I don't know if you have any personal experience with that at all, but you know, a takeaway would be to please encourage everyone who sees this to call bylaw so that we can get some stats on it.
They do. We've called for a number of instances. Each time, and it's a lot of it's the same individuals. You get to know them, and they came and had a talk with this person, and they do it again, and they have a talk with that person, and they do it again, and they do it again. We've even had some of the homes under construction where the contractors, one or two of them, were sleeping in their car overnight, consuming marijuana in the vehicle, reported it to the police, and they came, talked to them, and let them stay in the car because he had a dog. So I love that there's a lot of these rules, but sometimes there's a challenge with the enforcement and following through. I mean, if I were to park on the street and we had to plow the snow, I'd be the first one to get a ticket. But if I'm doing some of these other things again and again and again, you get warnings. It's the consistency.
Thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor McGough-Swain, then we'll wrap things up. Mr. Colesmith.
Yeah,
Sam, you have the
thanks.
floor.
Thanks for coming in. You made a comment you're reluctantly supporting. If I take that right now, the proposed is 3 dwelling units. Do I take that like ideally for you is 2? Is that what I'm interpreting from what you're
I
saying?
would like to see 2 and possibly even consideration for what the existing neighbors think. Now, we talk about a lot of choice for new people coming here, but seems to be perhaps a lack of consideration for the residents who live here. We create rules to accommodate new people, but it, in a sense, perhaps neglect some of the people who are here already when we make these changes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just say thanks I know there are several folks who have similar views to you, and it came across in the survey, and just really appreciate you stepping up here. It's not just one voice, right? There's many people that you're channeling here. So thanks for that. Appreciate it.
See no further questions for our presenter. Thanks for coming in, Anthony. I know. Thanks, Anthony, for coming in. Really appreciate that. Councilor McCook has a question, not for our presenter, but for administration based on one of the comments from our presenter. Councilor McCook, so I'm looking this way. Councilor McCook, you have the floor.
Thank you. Ms. Raymond, based on some of the changes here and some of the comments from the presenter, what's our recourse if driveways are marked and on plans and then subsequently change when they're put in?
Hang on a second. Your mic's not on, Ms. Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor McCook. When they review development permits for new houses, they'll be examining those drawings where there's a whole draw, like in the engineering drawing set, one of those would be showing where the driveway locations would be as it relates to street trees and all sorts of other things. They would be looking at that and then seeing, okay, did you build what you said you were going to build here? Yes, no. And then asking them for revisions if they're not. There have been instances where driveways have been built that haven't been according to plan. And then we do go out and do enforcement on those ones as well. But yeah, enforcement on driveways would be on a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
So can you just clarify what enforcement looks like?
Yeah, so one of those things would be, so first, we're going to work with them, trying to get them to revise the like their driveway location, working with them to, like, there's one instance I could point to where we were alerted to it at cribbing stage, which would be where they've gone out and they've kind of marked it out for concrete to be poured. And we've gone out and actually said, like, here's where this needs to be. This is what was approved. You know, I think it was an instance where they'd put in a triple where it's supposed to be a double, and those do cause conflicts with street trees and other things like that that we're trying to avoid. And so worked with them to actually revise the boundary of their driveway, and they were receptive to that. Otherwise, then you're kind of continuing to go down that, whether that's a stop order or an order to, you know, asking them to fix that and correct that by a certain date. That would escalate accordingly.
Okay, thank you. And if the driveway was poured, they would have to remove it and fix it?
The driveway was poured. We would examine it to see what kind of impacts it's done. So did you impede a tree? Are you within that drainage? Are you impacting the storm drainage bylaw? What other things are you doing? Is this a variance that then we would grant, or are you negatively impacting something? If they're negatively impacting them, then we would ask them to correct it.
Okay, thank you. And is that picked up, you know, if it's not picked up on the drawings, and as you said, it's later picked up when, you know, as they're doing it, are we going back and double checking that it is rectified?
Yes, we do go back and double check that if we put out any enforcement that has actually been done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarifications. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Council Hill, I know your button's on, Nathan. Procedurally speaking, we're going to the public hearing. I should have gone through all the questions for our people in favor, then people opposed, the people deemed it, and then coming back to Councilor McCook for a question on clarification from administration. So slight deviation on procedure. It was not a huge, big mistake, but I'm going to go back to procedure. I'll come back to you, Nathan, at a later time when we get through the public hearing, and then we have questions from administration in second reading and going forward. So a slight procedural error, but nothing, no damage done. So with that, we have nobody else deemed in speaking in favor of the bylaw. Is anybody in public wishes to speak against the bylaw? No one's registered already, so I'm taking no one's here to speak against the bylaw. Mr. Gill. Madam Clerk, we're allowed to now have Mr. Gill speak in public hearing. I believe we are, to make sure. You didn't register. Your microphone is on. Oh, you turned it off. Hang on. All right. Now it's on.
We just need his full name.
Okay. Mr. Kashmir Gill, and your address, please, in Beaumont, and you begin your presentation, please.
I'm in favor of affordable housing. However, I do believe they must be in designated and planned neighborhoods that take into account various issues that we see with the high density built neighborhoods. Some of these are being built after the fact. And my question really is a couple of points of clarification. One is, what is the definition of a lot? I saw the 3 dwellings or 4 dwellings on a lot. Is it a size attached to what that definition of lot is? Is it 29 feet or 32 feet, 40 feet? And secondly,
Hey,
how
Mr.
do the
Gill.
proposed,
Sorry to interrupt, but procedure speaking, you can't ask questions of council administration. You're here to present your viewpoint.
Okay.
And we can ask questions of you, but you can't ask questions of us. Procedure.
okay, I'll rephrase that, Mr. Mayor. So I'm clear about the definition, what a lot size is. So how do the proposed bylaw, I'm concerned about the bylaws not taking into account as I understand, and I could be wrong, the Canadian Building Code regarding safety and fire ratings. We've seen a number of fire occurrences in Beaumont, and that concerns me. And so like I said, I'm not an expert, but I would like to get a better understanding to see if the new built, especially a single yard lots, the housing built on those are inconsistent with the Canadian Building Code. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I
Yep.
appreciate that. I apologize for the confusion on the question part. We have to follow procedure on a public hearing especially. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gill on his presentation? Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak against the bylaw? Seeing none, I will then ask if anybody wishes to be heard who deems himself to be affected by the bylaw at this public hearing. Seeing none, we'll move on then. So Madam Clerk, we're going to do our procedure to keep the public hearing open, just as a precautionary measure with the new Bill 20. So I will entertain at this time a motion to suspend our rules bylaw. This will allow the public hearing to remain open in case we decide to, later this evening in our debate phase, to send the bylaw back to administration for any changes. That will allow us to have a public hearing in the future based on those potential changes, if they come at all. If they don't, we'll then close the public hearing, move into debate phase, and continue with our procedure. So with that, I will move that the rules under section 115 and 127 of meeting procedures bylaw 1014-22 be suspended to allow for council to debate bylaw 1055-24 prior to closing the public hearing. Again, this is a departure from our normal. We've done it with survey for 7 years a certain way. So at this point, discussion from members of council on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate this is recent changes, so we're all learning. Just a question, what does that actually mean? If the public hearing is still coming back,
Well,
so somebody can come in that
Okay.
isn't here already, or we
No.
can hear from people again? What does
let
it
me,
actually
let me
mean?
rephrase that. So prior to Bill 20, okay, we would have our public hearing and I would close the public hearing. We go to second reading. And if a member of council, let's just say it's you, for example, want to change the bylaw to make a major change to the bylaw, which requires administration to bring back a revised report. We would then send that bylaw back to administration to come back at a future time with the revised report based on your request. And then that would come back to council. There'd be another public hearing because the bylaw has been now changed, right? With the new rules, that wouldn't happen. The new rules say there's only one public hearing. So in the same scenario, public hearing happens. If I were to close it tonight, you make the same type of amendment to the bylaw back to administration. They come back with the report. We deal with the amended bylaw. There's no subsequent public hearing under the new rules. This allows us to keep the public hearing open in case something goes back to administration. If nothing goes back to administration, the bylaw goes to second and third reading tonight and we continue on. It's a bit confusing, I know, a bit clunky, but we're trying to make sure if we need a second public hearing, we can still have it because the first one's never been closed. I know it sounds weird, but we went through this a couple of times with administration. So Councilor Barnhart, continue if you'd like, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about scenarios. And so, for example, if we have a debate and there is a change that has to be dealt with by the administration, does that then allow the public that's here to speak to it again? Or is that part of the public hearing
It'll
closed?
come, because if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk can let me know. Like, for example, let me just walk you through this. The bylaw tonight suggests 3 dwelling units, okay? If a member of council later this evening, during our debate process under our second reading, wants to get a report back from council administration to go to 2 from 3, and that were to pass, that's material change to the bylaw, right? Go back to administration, they'll bring that back at a future time. Because the bylaw, public hearing has not been closed, we can have a second public hearing, if you will, in the future, because the first one's not closed yet. Is that right, Madam Clerk? That you had that essentially correct? This way, we're giving us we're hedging our bets and allowing a public hearing if we need it at a later time. It would not be tonight, it'd be at a later time. Madam Clerk, did I get that essentially correct?
Essentially, so we won't, when we suspend the rules, The mayor will adjourn the public hearing, so it just sets it forward to a later time in the meeting or a future meeting. This then allows council to debate the bylaw. And then if there are any material changes proposed to the bylaw, it can go back to administration and the public hearing will remain open until those changes come back. Administration would re-advertise that public hearing likely to say that it's reconvening on a certain date and these changes are being made. And we go through the same process, but the public hearing itself remains open. So rather, we no longer have the ability to close the public hearing, make changes to be referred back to administration, and then hold another public hearing to allow the public an opportunity to speak to it. This way, by adjourning the public hearing to a later time in the meeting or a future meeting, it allows the public to still have that opportunity to speak to any changes to the bylaw.
Councillor Barnhart. Oh, sorry. It went red. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, please.
It just seems odd because the public hearing is a time when we're supposed to be coming with our minds open and listening to what's coming to us. And if this goes on for 2 weeks, essentially, how do you keep bias out of that? So, it just seems to me it's an odd thing. I know we didn't create it, we inherited it. But again, to me, a public hearing is when we're supposed to be as unbiased as possible and listen to what the public is telling us. And when we have 2 weeks of that, potentially that's going to be very difficult to manage. So that's my point, and I'll leave it at that.
I agree. I did mention it's a bit clunky process, but this does allow us to keep the public hearing open, to engage the public at a later time if we need to, as opposed to closing the public hearing and not having a second opportunity down the road. So with that, I hope that's giving enough information on this motion. So seeing no further discussion from members of council, I will ask you to vote on the motion before you. The motion carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor. Thank you, council. So Madam Clerk, I will declare the public hearing to be adjourned, not closed at this time. Do we then have a motion to go to second reading and then we start debating second reading? Is that the proper procedure? I want to make sure we get it right because it is new territory for us. Madam Clerk.
No, there's no reason to move forward with second reading. We've suspended the meeting procedures bylaw to allow council to be able to debate the bylaw. We do have to close the public hearing before we proceed with second reading. So we've just adjourned it.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, council, we're going to debate the proposed bylaw prior to having second reading start, which is, again, this is new territory. It's a little uncomfortable, a little clunky. I get that, but now's the time to, I come back to Councilor Telebas first. You had your button on before previously. So I'll come back to you first. So the rules of the game now are we're going to debate the bylaw with questions, concerns, potential changes. This is now the time, I believe, Madam Clerk, any member of council could suggest changes that would send this back to administration. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I'm on a roll. All right. Councilor Telebas. 1 in a row. The peanut gallery, 1 in a row. Thanks. Councilor Telebas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, clarity around process here. So any amendments are made here and not during the second reading?
Yes, you're correct. Actually, I did misspeak slightly. We will not have second reading yet. Right now, we're just having a debate. So if you want to make any changes to this proposed bylaw, now would be the time.
Perfect.
We can entertain that, or we can have a discussion in general. You have first on the floor, so you get to go
Absolutely.
first.
I'll take that. Thank you. First, I just have a question for clarification. This is to Ms. Raymond. You had mentioned that we had received 1 letter of support in regards to the bylaw change, except that they wanted the additional ADUs to remain. Are you able to provide, I have 2 questions, clarity as to 1, if this is a local resident that has provided this letter? And no, I know. And 2, if this group or this individual would potentially benefit either directly or indirectly from the suggestions they've provided, both financially or otherwise?
Your microphone's on, Ms. Foley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, to answer Councillor Natelemos's question. The letter of support came from Build, which is the new organization that represents developers and builders in the metro region. And so the letter of support came from them. As you identified, they indicated that they had concerns about a reduction in ADUs because it reduced the potential for choice, but we're otherwise supportive of the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just for clarity, the support letter, the folks don't live within the community, and also they could potentially benefit from having the additional dwelling units, whether financially or elsewise.
They may or may not live in the community. Lots of our home builders do live here. And yes, they would benefit financially through whatever changes are made or be negatively impacted. So there's a impact to them one way or the other.
Perfect, thank you. So I do really want to lead to our presenters right now and just thank them for coming out. Reason being, it is the community and the voices of the community that we want to hear. And right now we have two individuals that, although reluctantly potentially supports it, in the background struggles with it a bit, and then another gentleman who has some concerns regarding it too. So the voices of our community members are the voices that voted us all in. I can appreciate that there's a shortage of housing nationally, but packing surplus families into a single housing unit by just adding additional dwelling units causes a huge disruption to existing communities. It's our job to listen to our community members affected by these additional dwelling units, and it's our responsibility to look after the best interest of our current residents. So as my first amendment to this bylaw, I would ask that we amend the bylaw to make the additional dwelling units discretionary, and the approval be discretionary as opposed to just approving based on the application. Again, based on the individuals that will be affected by this. So I would ask that we engage anyone within that community or within that area to be engaged and asked if this is appropriate for their community and if they feel there would be disruptions. So that would be my first amendment. And my second amendment would be that houses wanting 2 additional dwelling units require a business license unless they can prove otherwise. My reasoning behind that is because the majority of these units will be used to make a profit and therefore be considered a business. And while applying for the business license, there will be additional requirements that will be reviewed and potentially will capture some of the other considerations, such as additional businesses in and around the area, additional daycares, things like that, that we are seeing within these communities. So by adding that secondary process, it allows us to further assess the 2 additional dwelling units and allows us to make a very conscious decision as to how we want to move forward. And then just as a final note, so those were the 2 amendments. There was a comment made along the lines of, yes, we are accepting more condensed housing and parking congestion is also accepted or is going to be a requirement. But we have to keep in mind, as mentioned by a resident of Beaumont here, and I've seen it myself, we're sacrificing the safety of the community by adding all of this additional parking. I mean, there's children throughout the entire community. If there's vehicles everywhere, you do not see them, especially when they're by crosswalks crossing across the street. So I really think, although, you know, the reduced number of dwelling units, I totally agree with, and but I think further consideration needs to go into each individual application as opposed to a stamp of approval based on every application.
Thank you, Councillor. CEO Schwartz, you want to make a comment? I've got a question from Madam Clerk. So, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, I'm just looking to clarify your first point about making this use discretionary. I'm not sure that we have the same understanding of what that would mean, and maybe Ms. Raymond can help us out. But what are you looking at there? That is the expectation that we go out to the public and they decide yes or no, because that's not what discretionary means.
I think a little bit of both. So perhaps we could modify the wording, discretionary, so that it's approved on a case-by-case basis. I think that's important as opposed to that stamp of approval. But yeah, secondary public engagement, which isn't uncommon in several municipalities. So just involving the direct residents that are within that area who will be affected by the change.
CO Schwartz?
Yeah, and again, I'm trying to clarify, Ms. Raymond, maybe you could help me. It sounds like you want to put another step in to filter the decision, and that's not what discretionary means. Kendra, can you dig me out of this hole that I'm digging myself into?
Ms. Raymond, your microphone.
I'm just trying to get
is on.
clarification, because
No,
I don't
but-
want you to expect something and then we can't deliver it. And maybe we can.
Just maybe if I could clarify the process for what makes something a permitted use versus a discretionary use. So permitted use is approved by right, you apply for it, you meet all the regulations, requirements in land use bylaw, the development authority has to issue the permit. When it's discretionary, there is still use standards that need to be complied with. So whether that might be parking, that might be, there's a number of different criteria that would go with whatever we thought that the offsite impacts might be, is trying to minimize that. So looking for the development application to tell us how they were going to be addressing those different concerns before we would say yes or no on those applications. Discretionary uses, though, are subject to appeal, which maybe is what I think maybe you're getting at, Councillor Natellenboss, where we do notify adjacent landowners that this development has been approved near them, and they would have 3 weeks to be able to formally appeal a decision of the development authority for discretionary use or where a variance was given to relax the standards in the land use bylaw.
Councillor Telebus, that answers your question?
It wasn't my question, but yes, yeah.
Sorry, you know what I mean, okay? So, Madam Clerk, I know we have legal on the line. I think you just need to close session to figure out if these amendments are considered material enough to be sent back to administration and not proceed to second reading this evening. Do you want to have all the potential discussion and amendments brought first, then go to closed session once, as opposed to going closed session now, dealing with Councilor Telebus's concern, then coming back out in case someone else has something else to say? How best to proceed?
I think it would be best to hear from other members of council
That's what
to
I'm
see if they
thinking.
have other considerations, and then we can go into closed session to discuss with legal.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was assuming, so just for clarifying, so does that make sense, council? We're okay? So, Councilor Telebus had the floor, we're moving on then, any other questions or comments or amendment potential coming from other members of council? Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor.
Yeah, as we're in new territory at this point again, I'm just looking for yet another piece of clarification here around the process. So we're having a debate now, even though we haven't had second reading yet. So that's
Yes.
the first piece.
Yes.
So then upon second reading, someone presumably will move a motion, which will trigger another debate on the motion of the second reading. Is that correct? Maybe administration needs to help out with that question.
I think I know what you asked, but I'm not sure you understand what you asked. Madam
So
Clerk,
I'll
will you
just,
jump in?
I'll just kind of re-ask the question. So we're having there's a debate now. This is a new process. Then someone presumably will move second reading. Then that inherently triggers a debate on second reading again. Then, then someone would move third reading, that would trigger a debate on third reading. So this amended process here that has been brought to us, we didn't create this, this has been brought to this room by the province, has created a debate that precedes traditionally what would be the second reading debate and the third reading debate.
Yeah, I can maybe begin with that. I'll have Madam Clerk back me up on this. So, yes, we're having a debate now, and potentially speaking, the debate may lead to changes to the bylaw, right? Which we'll go into closed session. We'll ask our legal advice if potential amendments proposed by this discussion are material. If they're material, the bylaw will then go back to administration to incorporate those amendments back to at a later time. And then we'll have second reading down the road. So again, I understand it's clunky, and I understand it this morning very clearly. Then I thought about it, got confused, and it got clear again. So it's a bit clunky, but hope that's helps you a little bit. So if you have any concerns yourself that you want to bring forward to amend this bylaw or make any changes, now would be the time. Does that help you?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'll start with some comments maybe. I can
Please. Yep,
just
please do.
get stuff on the floor here. So for me, September 5th, 2023, I put forward 4 motions. They were, I propose a change to the current recommendation. I propose limiting ADUs to 1 per dwelling. That motion failed. It wasn't supported. I made another motion that said I propose a change to the current regulations. I propose limiting additional dwelling units for front attached garage product to 1. That motion failed, wasn't supported. Then the third I brought forward that evening was I proposed a change to the current regulations. I proposed limiting additional dwellings for rear detached garage product to 2 and requiring 1 to be a garage suite. That was defeated. And then the fourth that I brought forward that night was I proposed that we amend the land use bylaw to require 1 parking stall for every unit ADU over 45 square meters. And that would have been a change from 75. So those 4 were defeated, and that was how my evening went there. I haven't moved from those positions. That's still where I'm at. I don't think that we've made substantive changes with what's been put in front of us tonight for this amending bylaw that matches the level of concern that I've continually received from community concerns. So 4-3, there's a win, I guess, as the one presenter tonight said, but I don't think it goes far enough to address parking concerns. So what council and administration has heard continually from me is that I'm supportive of multiple families in a house, but the outcome of that is parking issues. And it's parking issues in cul-de-sacs, it's parking issues along side streets. People not parking in their garages and on their driveways doesn't help either. But you know, what is in front of us tonight in this amending bylaw isn't substantive of enough change based upon the level of concern that I've heard from the community. So I'll leave my comment there for now, and you know, I'll stop there, Mayor, for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, you turned your button off. Are you back on again? Whichever is easier. Sam, Councillor McGough-Swain, you have the floor then.
So thanks for the comments. You say the parking piece doesn't go far enough. What does? And is it back to your motions? And the reason why you can't bring them up here is because we're within that 1-year window? That's why you reiterated that point? Right. So I guess this is where the confusion comes in, right? And personally, the process, the way I view it is this just gives us a chance to debate it, right? And allows us to have that public hearing further down the line, right? Because the concern that was heard is we have this public hearing and council makes a bunch of changes and then the public don't get a chance to comment on it again. So I actually quite like the process. Steve is running into a different procedural challenge where he put forward some options that didn't get the support a year ago, and maybe today would get the support with a new mix up here and different views, etc. So what I'm hearing from Steve is, you know, if this discussion happened on September 6th, he would be able to put forward the comments that he was looking to do. So is that a fair summation of what you're trying to achieve? Ish. And so for me, like, I'd be interested in that conversation, but if we can't have it, then what are we doing?
Yeah, I understand the dilemma more now. I thought it through a little bit after Steve spoke. Madam Clerk, I'm just wondering, I know we have that 1 year sort of after a motion is defeated, it can't come back for a year. But given our procedure here, I don't know, I'm trying to find a way to make things work. Can Steve talk about making potential amendments and we go into a closed session, because it could be between Councilor Telebus's comments earlier and Steve's, there may be enough things maybe for material changes going forward. So I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but I'm trying to make things as easy as possible. And the procedure right now is making it muddy no matter how I try. So any advice, Madam Clerk?
So if I understand correctly, some of the changes that Councillor Van Newkirk may be putting forward are similar to ones that were defeated in notice of motions that you brought forward previously. Yes.
Yes.
And it's not within a year. So you can suspend your meeting procedures bylaw, because that's where it states that the motion can't be brought back for within a year. We can also, in order to determine whether or not some of these changes are material, we do have legal counsel on the line, and it suggested that we go into closed session for those types of discussions. So you could put them forward in public, and then we could have that discussion in closed session on whether they are considered material changes or not.
So having said that, though, we already have suspended our meeting bylaw already. We have to do it a second time to accommodate Steve being able to speak, right? We've already done that effectively.
We did suspend, council suspended the meeting procedures bylaw with respect to specific sections. So it would have to be a motion to suspend the specific section of that meeting procedure bylaw.
Okay,
For this
with
purpose.
that then, I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess and let Steve and yourself have that conversation to see if he wants to proceed, because that'll require a motion to suspend our meeting bylaw to allow Steve to mention those topics in public before we go into closed sessions. That's my understanding. So I'll declare a 5-minute recess and let Councilman Newkirk speak to Madam Clerk and try and figure this part out procedurally. Are we okay with that? Thank you. We are back live after a short recess for administrative review. Madam Clerk, we have decided on a procedure to go forward to incorporate Councilman Newkirk's concerns.
Yes, so I've put a motion up, a proposed motion to suspend the rules for the meeting procedures bylaw to allow a motion to come back within 1 year of it being defeated.
Thank you. For expediency, I'll make that motion myself. Unless Steve wants to make that motion, I can do it if you like, Steve. Just to move it along. I'll move that the rules under section 64 of the meeting procedures bylaw 1014-22 be suspended to allow for a previously defeated motion to be considered within 1 year after the date of the original motion. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Discussion on the motion, members of council. Councilman Newkirk, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just thanks to administration to help guide the process here.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. There's always a will, there's always a way. Any discussion on the motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, council, would you vote on the motion, please? That carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor of the motion. Thank you, council. So with that, I'll go back to Councilman Newkirk then. You have the opportunity now to bring forward back some potential amendments. We're going to close session, determine if there are material change to the bylaw itself. So Steve, do you want to make any comments at this point or come back to you later?
Yeah, just a question for administration. So is this the point now where I would put forward the motion or two that I would wish to reconsider?
And we'll determine by legal in closed session if it's material change or not. Madam Clerk, clarify, please.
Yeah, I was just going to confirm that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah,
Now's the time, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. So I would move. So 3 of the 4 that I put forward at September 25th, I will put back on the table. The first is I propose limiting additional dwelling units for front attached garage product to 1. The second is, sorry, just let me wrap my head around this, Mayor.
No problem. Take your time, Steve. We're learning on the go a little bit here, which is sometimes a little clunky, but
The second is I propose limiting additional. So what happened on September 5th is that there was incremental changes as we went through the 8 pieces. So on September 5th, my motions were responding to the options. So I'm going to go back in that way. So the second was I propose limiting additional dwelling units for rear detached garage product to 2 and requiring 1 to be a garage suite. And then the third that I would put back is I propose limiting ADUs to 1 per dwelling. Just to speak to that it may seem odd, because it is a little bit. These were responses to the 8. So I tried to present them in an incremental order here, just for discussion. So,
Okay. So not 1 plus 2, but 1 plus 1 is what you're suggesting.
yeah, there's 3 different pieces to
Yeah.
to this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Options, I suppose.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you, Counselor. Seeing any further discussion at this point, Counselor Telebus, okay, I'll come back to you, then we'll kind of move into closed session to determine if these various comments and amendments are considered material change, and then we'll deal with that when we come out of closed session. Counselor Telebus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to, I guess, put forward the amendment for the 4th one that Councillor Van Nieuwkerk just didn't put forward, which is 1 parking stall for every unit over 45 meters square.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that. Counselor Monkoff Swain, you have the floor now.
Thank you, and stop me if this is in the right place. I just want to speak to your first one that you have up there, just to make sure that it's right. So you've got options and considerations for further amendments to the land use bylaw that would make implementing more than 1 additional dwelling unit a discretionary use. So I get that, but I also heard you say engage the public. That doesn't say that there. Is that still your intent? Because I thought when you say discretionary administration shared, but that doesn't mean go out and engage the public. So I want to make sure that what you want us to discuss is, to me, what I heard you saying is that was a key part. If there's going to be ADUs, they want to be able to engage and notify neighbors. So do you want that in that option there, or how does that work?
Yes, sir.
Oh, hang on, Counselor. My mistake. Your microphone's on now.
Thank you. I guess just for clarity too, it's not more than 1 additional dwelling unit. It is an additional dwelling unit, regardless of 1 or 2. But what was described by Ms. Raymond there was through discretionary use, all adjacent landowners will be notified and given the opportunity to appeal the decision.
So you're good with that? I just want to make sure that's what I heard. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, just clarity for Ms. Raymond, that appeal, is it solely based on the existing bylaw where it would get rejected right away if it met all criteria of the bylaw, or do we take into consideration the concerns that are raised in addition to the bylaw?
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Natellenbos. Can you just clarify that those concerns would be raised through from the adjacent landowners themselves as it relates to the application? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct, yeah.
The current process right now is that adjacent landowners aren't notified until after the decision is made. So no, it would not take into account. It'd just be based on solely on the bylaw.
If we're going discretionary.
Right now, any decisions that the Development Authority would make are based on the bylaw, and they do not take into account any public circulation for those discretionary uses, unless we felt like we needed to do that to determine more offsite impacts or other things like that. But for a secondary suite, we typically would not. So it'd be just the land use bylaw.
Well, I think Councillor Monkoff Swain, because I misunderstood that. So yes, to modify that for public engagement for community members within that affected community.
Thank you. So having said that, I think that kind of covers off the discussion. We have more than enough material now to go into, I believe, Madam Clerk, into our closed session to determine if these, and I think they're going to be, but we'll have to determine with proper legal advice, if these are material changes to the bylaw, which we then be sent back to administration to come back to council at a later time and have a subsequent public hearing at a later time, which we've allowed ourselves to do that. So, Madam Clerk, at this point, is closed session the appropriate course of action? Welcome to our guest, but we'll just sorry, but the timing is just funny on that one. So don't go too far though. So Madam Clerk, yes, thank you. I will move that council went to closed session at 7:22 p.m. pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, Section 27. Discussion on the motion, members of council. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion to move in camera? That carries unanimously, 7-0.
with the guests that are in
No,
attendance?
we'll deal with this first.
Okay.
We may adjust our agenda after that, but we'll deal with this first. Thank you. I was looking at, we have a guest for 8-3. We may move it to next on the item because there are guests attending, so, and we're here for the duration, so. Let me know when we're live, please. We are live now. Thank you. We are live back after our closed session. We have some motions coming out of closed session. And can you make that just a little bigger? I'm getting a little old in my old age here. I can't read that thing. Just a tad bigger if you wouldn't mind. That's so much better. Thanks. We have some motions potentially coming out of our closed session. So we were going to move the first one to the bottom. Would you take a second to do that? And these motions pertain to our continuing discussion on bylaw 1055-24. That's where we're at right now. So we're going to take these as individual motions, not as a block. So Councilor Telebas, do you want to move the first motion there? Your microphone is on.
Thank you. Yes, I would, I guess, how do we want to do this? Just read the.
Just say I move
Okay.
and number one, and then continue, please.
Okay, I would like to move that options and considerations for a business license be required for units having 2 additional dwelling units unless the applicant can prove that the additional dwelling units will not be used for rental income.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion. I think you've already spoken to it already, so any final comments before I'll ask the question? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barnett, are you willing to speak on this motion? Your microphone went on.
Yes, I'd like.
Okay, Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor.
I'd like to clarify that it's including the first part as well, that the bylaw be sent back to the administration for further information on that, because we're not voting on that as much as we're voting on the sending it back and bringing a report forward. Is that correct?
Correct.
Because it wasn't read that way, and I just want to make sure that's the understanding.
Yeah, so this motion, this motion passes, it goes back to administration, to bring the report back to us. If it doesn't pass, we move on to the next item, on the next motion.
Okay, so I
Okay.
would, support it, come back for with more information.
Okay, Councillor McCook.
I guess this will come back with some of the extra information. I guess, what are you hoping to see that would determine whether someone can prove that it's rental versus not?
Councillor Telebas.
Absolutely. I guess, I mean, we would like to have a bit of an honest system here where if we see this as being used and intended for family, it's a little different story than what we see obviously throughout our community where we see rentals and an income being made. The biggest reason for this is because if we're going to have 2 additional dwelling units, there's special considerations made more so on the business application side, where we could consider things more thoroughly, such as the parking and what have you. So it just adds an additional avenue to make sure that what we're putting in place is appropriate for the community or the setting it's being placed in.
Yeah, well, I understand, like, I understand the spirit behind it. I am just trying to wrap my head around what exactly someone would have to show to be able to prove that it's just family versus rental and honor system for sure. So but I guess we're getting that information back, and that will be helpful. I'm just not really sure what concrete thing we would have that would be able to prove to someone that it's just my parents moving in. So that's just kind of where I'm unsure of that, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. So just first, I'll say this now and not at every motion to refer, but just want to thank the public for your patience and for my part, state for the record that we have excellent people on staff and administration that advise us on how to stay on the right side of the law and make sure that our public proceedings are fair and all the members of the public have the opportunity to be heard and have their concerns and their support or their frustration with something that we're considering heard and registered before a decision is made. But the province has forced us out of our normal operating procedure. So we appreciate your patience with us as we try to do our best to make sure that this public hearing remains in the spirit of making sure that your voices are heard before we make consideration. So I garbled that in the end, but just thank you for your patience. And I want to say for the record that this has been our advocacy with the province all the way along, that this was one of our primary concerns with an omnibus bill like Bill 20 coming forward with so many changes rolled into one, that we suggested there would be unforeseen consequences of that. And tonight is an example of one of those things. So thank you for your patience. Two, we did clarify this on another one of your proposed amendments, Councillor Natelmbas. So I just wanted to make sure here, are you intending that this potential amendment only applies to units having 2 additional dwelling units or any additional?
For this one is 2.
Okay.
Where it's seen more as a business.
Thank you. And then my last comment or question for administration is, currently, do landowners who own a property that's primarily a rental income, a rental property, are they required to have a business license in Beaumont?
Ms. Raymond.
Through the mayor to Councillor Penrod, no.
So that would be my concern with this potential amendment, is now we would have 2 different sets of rules for landlords in Beaumont, and that potentially disadvantages some or causes a higher burden on some than others. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk sent me a message. We should put a amendment to this with a timeline for the report to come back to council. We're going to suggest in the first line that it come back end of 4th quarter for administration. That's a timeline they felt they can work with. So we'll add, if you don't mind, a friendly amendment to the motion that it come back by the end of the 4th quarter. I'll move on then. Next questions from council. Councilor McCoy-Swain, you have the floor.
Okay, I'll give this a shot. I guess my question is, where does this end? If we push this back, right, then in September, someone else has a concept and then we don't vote on it. Like in this report, admin's recommending 4 things: reduction from 4 to 3, new requirement, front attached garage, 0 side yard renamed, and additional block standards. I'm okay with this if we want to get that information, but I don't want it to be at the expense of the discussion on this. So procedurally, to me, the way that I think about all these different things on here, and I'll just speak to this particular motion, is that that's outside, and it's totally fine, it's the time to bring it up, but that's outside of what the report is in front of us. So can we can vote on this and we can ask for administration, but if we refer the land use bylaw back, right, then we're not going to get to that vote, right? And then we'll wait for September and so end of Q4. And the end of Q4, someone says, well, actually, I want to do this little tweak. And then we push it again and again and again. So where does it end? I would be okay to vote on this motion outside of sending the whole land use bylaw back, right? And it might not be Q4 or whatever that looks like. But I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to vote, because we've got the information in front of us, right? We might not all like it or agree with it, but we've got the information in front of us on those 4 things that you're recommending. So my process question is, or maybe a tweak to the motion, is instead of referring the whole land use bylaw back, therefore we don't get to these questions, is just to ask administration to bring that information back on option 1 around the land use bylaw. And then at that point, we can, if council agrees on any of these things, then we can make a motion to bring that land use bylaw back to a public hearing. That's how I would like to proceed. We vote on everything that's here. This motion still goes and we get the additional information that we want, but we still get to vote on what we asked for, which is what administration's brought in front of us. So that's where I'm going here. We could never stop and we'll never actually do anything. And then who loses out is the residents, because we never actually changed the bylaw.
Okay, I'm not sure how to go forward. I'm not being sarcastic either.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't misunderstand. Ms. Raymond, your mic is now on.
Thank you. Just to clarify that, what I'm hearing Councillor Munkoff Swain say is that you would vote on the bylaw that exists in front of you today, and this would be an additional report that comes back on these different options. Is that what you're hearing?
Right.
Like-
So we at least move the needle forward. We may be still only at the 10-yard line. We've still got 90 yards to go, but at least we're moving this forward, right? And yeah, this is a report back, and that comes back, and that could include the additional information. So we ask for a report, not to amend the bylaw, but we ask for a report on the impact of those 6 things that are here. Then at least we get to speak to the 4 options today. And if that report comes back and council says, you know what, I like what's come back in the report, we're now going to direct administration to update the bylaw again.
Yeah, the bylaw is iterative, right? You're not one and done. So yes.
Okay, I'm a little clearer now. What you were saying, that makes sense. I understand now. So, okay, I'm not sure I'm next to proceed in this. Madam Clerk, I have a thought, but I'm going to you first.
So we can substitute the motion, or Councillor Munkoff Swain could recommend amendment to the motion as what you just said. Yeah.
Okay, and so to that, I think maybe I said, my vote is there. If the motion is reframed to, instead of saying amending the bylaw, is just asking for a report for information to come back. That means we still get that. It means that we still, once we come into this, once we get through this motion, then we still go back and debate those 4 motions and those 4 recommendations from administration.
So Councillor Telebas.
And I would, just to be clear, and then I would recommend that instead of going one by one, we just have the full sweeping admin bring back on all 6.
Yeah.
90% of the information is there, and we get that information to come back. And we can vote on it tonight. And if we like, so number, what is that, number 2, right? Where it says limiting dwelling units to 1 per dwelling, right? If we vote tonight and it passes from 4 to 3, right? It doesn't mean that we can't look at it again when that report comes back.
Okay, so to clarify in my mind, if we take this course of action, right? Take these 6 to come back at a later future report. We then go back to tonight's business, which is debating, having second reading and passing second reading, possibly in a third reading based on the report. And those 4 recommendations would go into force, right? Public hearing would close then because the second reading is happening. This report will come back at a later time. And if for example, the bylaw is passed tonight from 4 to 3 dwelling units, this report comes back end of 4th quarter and the council decides in January, yep, we're going to open this can of worms again. Sorry. So that, well, that's how it feels today. Again, I'm not frustrated with the council. I'm frustrated with the procedure that's been somewhat forced upon us, not with the council or administration. We're all doing the best we can and we're all doing a very good job. It'll come back to us at a later time. Is that correct, Madam Clerk, on the procedure if we did this?
So yes, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. So first of all, we do have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
So all council has to agree to the substitution. Then you would vote on this motion, you can move back to the public hearing, close it, proceed with second and third reading. The report would come back at a later
In the
date.
Q4?
Yeah.
Okay. So we made the adjustment. How do we feel about this adjustment? Madam Clerk, do we have to have consensus on the amendment? Is that what you said a moment ago? Okay. Do we have consensus on the amendment? Councilor Telebas.
No, I actually think this is somewhat counterintuitive. We have the public hearing to hear the voices of the public, and unfortunately, we only had 2 individuals speaking. But my understanding is that basically we had 2 individuals not in favor of the proposed bylaw. And that's the reason we have these public hearings. By approving this bylaw and saying down the road we'll adjust it, we're just kicking the can down the road as far as I'm concerned. One of the biggest things that I got from the two individuals that were here is especially one is we want to be heard. And currently that's not an option. And I think what's most important, and I'm willing to drop everything that's up there. Obviously, Councillor Van Nieuwerk has a lot of these motions as well, or amendments, but is just the one where we engage the individuals within that community to see if they're okay with additional dwelling units in their community. And it's so important for many reasons. I mean, you talk to some families that potentially have special needs or requirements for their kids, and they're not able to get that access because there's vehicles in and around their house. There's so many circumstances where it should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and the individuals that are affected by it be heard and listened to. And I think that's the most important part of this bylaw, is not just stamp the approval and we're good to go. And it's a shortfall. So I don't support the current bylaw as it stands because it doesn't listen to the public, especially after this public hearing and we've had concerns raised.
And I would say to that, that we've had the public hearing, we've heard the concerns, and if you want to vote against it because of the concerns, then you vote against it. That's not stopping, because I'm with you. That's not stopping the information coming, right? It's not disrespecting the public hearing process. We've heard it on the 4 options, right? And we've heard 2 residents tell us that they don't like it, right? And you're more than happy to vote against it, and that's fine. And if it votes down, then it votes down. What I'm suggesting is we respect that public hearing. We used all the public information as possible to get as many people here. We're going to take the feedback we heard during the public hearing into our decision on whether we vote yes or no on the bylaw. But what this does is it still allows us to have that vote, and you still get the information. So by voting yes or no, it doesn't mean that you're not supportive of the public information and going out and talking to residents in advance. That information is going to come back. All I'm asking for is, let's just vote on a couple of these things. We'll get that, and so that we can check the box, move the ball forward, and then in Q4, that information comes back. And to your point, if at that point, then residents are able to have another say at that point. If we just defer it, then I'll use your word, counterintuitive. Right now, we can have 4 additional dwelling units, right? And if we don't vote tonight, then we're going to have 4 all the way through the rest of this year, and that'll be within the allowed bylaw. If we vote and it goes to 3, then at least it's 3 until we get to that next phase. So I don't think it's just respecting the public hearing process. I think it is respecting it. We heard people here in front of us.
Yeah, we had 2 people for public hearings. Sometimes we have 10. We had 2. That's how it goes. So it doesn't mean we're just disrespecting the process. 2 came out and 1 reluctantly supported it, not totally against it, to be fair. So that's how we had 2 people for public hearing. So
absolutely.
Let's move it along.
If I could add just 2 more comments.
Very quickly, please.
Thank you. There has been a lot of change in composition in terms of your current council. And one of the reasons likely was because of what we had discussed with the general public out when we're doing our tours, when we're talking with individuals. And a big part of it was the land use bylaw. And as it stands right now, I would say the majority of the public is not satisfied with what's being proposed. So I will not support the second reading because of that reason. But I appreciate whatever avenue we want to go to make these changes happen.
Okay, let's move on.
And that's fine, but vote against it.
Then just vote against it. I agree. Let's move on, please, in the discussion. Councilor Barnhart, you have the floor. Oh, hang on. You have the floor now.
Could you clarify if I'm to be speaking to the motion that's on the floor? Is that, or am I, because something else just
Yeah,
happened
can
here in
the
terms of
motion go back
process.
on the screen, please? It went off.
When I pushed
Hang
the
on,
button,
Kathy.
we were talking about a business license and
Yeah.
then it changed.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the motion that's on the floor right now is number 1.
Mhm.
And specifically to that one, yeah. I guess the question is, we're basically going to Councillor Natellenbas, we're basically getting revenue from that property, but we're not changing the number of dwelling units. The way I see it, it may be a deterrent or not. I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that. I wonder if you wanted to explain that a little bit as to what does that actually do to change? I think Councillor McCook was also asking a question. What's the material change other than revenue to the city? And we don't require that now. So we would be increasing that. There would be more people upset about that, I think, quite honestly. We haven't asked the public their opinion on that.
Give me a second here. Okay, thank you, Councillor Barnhart. You had a question to Councillor Telebas? Okay, quickly, please, Councillor Telebas.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. Yeah, I do believe the biggest aspect behind this is not so much the financial gain that very minimal at that the city would see, but more importantly would be an evaluation of what's in and around that area, considering other businesses as well. So making sure that there aren't other businesses within there before another additional dwelling unit is being added. A, traffic, B, safety, C, congestion, just the overall evaluation. By adding this additional requirement, we're going to make sure that there's not two other businesses within that area. So it's just an increased assessment to make sure it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, so Sam's suggestion, we need a consensus, right? We don't have consensus for that because Councillor Telebas did not want to, and that's fine. Just we're clear on moving forward. We got to move this along here, so.
That's correct. There wasn't consensus, so you need to vote on the motion on the floor.
Okay,
And we don't have it, so I won't put it out. I won't waste the time.
sorry?
We don't have the consensus clearly, so I won't put that
Yeah.
motion on the floor.
Okay, that's unfortunate, but that's okay. That's how it goes. All right, so let's move this, Councillor Penrod, a quick comment, please, and we're gonna move this along. We need to figure out what we're gonna do here.
Thank you, Mayor. It's actually a point of clarification. So I believe that we're still operating under a suspension of our rules with respect to our meeting procedures bylaw. Is that correct?
Madam Clerk?
That's correct, only with respect to certain sections.
Okay. And we listed those sections when we voted. That's correct?
That's correct.
So I'm just going to put forward, it seems to me that we're chasing our tails a little bit tonight, in part because we've suspended our normal operating procedures. When I voted on that motion to suspend, I voted based on a narrow consideration around wanting to make sure that we can abide by Bill 20 with this public hearing. But I feel like we've kind of gone beyond that. And now we're considering multiple other things and chasing our tails. So I'm not sure how to suggest this, but I am of the mind after the discussion that we've had, that I'd like to consider the amendments that are before us initially that brought this public hearing initially. And if we're operating under our normal meeting procedures, all of the rest of these pieces could be brought forward as notices of motion. And to me, that would be the best way to proceed at this point. So I'll leave it at that.
CEO Schwartz, you want to help out here for a moment?
Yeah, I was just gonna, from a procedural perspective, you have the votes to waive the procedural bylaws. We can't turn it around. What we would need is a unanimous vote to amend the motion and go the route that Councillor Monkhoff-Swain was suggesting.
I'm sorry, can you say that again to me? I'm not sure I understood that, honestly. I'd appreciate you trying to help. I'm trying to make sure I understand.
No, my point is that you voted to suspend the procedures. You can't now not suspend them. That's what I'm hearing you suggest.
Councillor Penrod, your mic's now on.
Sorry, my initial clarification that I don't think I got to was at what point do we revert back to our normal? Does there need to be a motion to go back, or is that effective for the duration of this meeting? Or that's the piece that I'm not clear on, is how long that suspension is in effect for.
Madam Clerk.
The motion was to allow defeated motions that were within a year to be brought back. So as long as those motions have been brought forward, you can revert back to your regular meeting procedures bylaw.
Councillor Penrod.
And sorry to clarify, are you also talking about the public hearing?
Yes.
So you would need a motion to revert back to your regular meeting procedures bylaw.
Okay. I'm trying to simplify, not overcomplicate or further complicate, but
Any further comments, Councillor Penrod?
no.
Okay. My understanding that where we are at this point right now is that we have a motion before us. We need to deal with the motion. Can you put it back on the screen, please? It keeps going away on me here. Thank you. My understanding is that we need to deal with this motion. There was a suggestion to make a change to it. It wasn't, not unanimous consent to do that. So I'm going to suggest we need to vote on the motion, which is option number 1. Sorry. The motion is to refer the report back to administration for report by the end of Q4. And we're going to vote on 1 down to 6 individually. That's what we decided to do coming out of camera. And we got down a rabbit hole. We didn't get in to get it done. So I believe that's the proper way to proceed. So seeing no further discussion on the motion, Sam, your microphone is on. Is that just from before? Thank you. I apologize. So council, we're going to vote now on the number 1 as an individual motion, and then number 2 down to number 6. So seeing no further discussion on the motion, just to repeat it then, the bylaw 1055-24, land use bylaw amending bylaw be referred back to administration, further information and report by the end of Q4 2024 on the following. Being number 1, I won't read number 1 again, but that's what we're doing right now. Okay? Any discussion on that? Any further discussion on the motion? All right, council, I'll ask you then please to vote on the motion. Oh, sorry. All right, that motion is carried. 1, 2, 3, 4 yes. Natelibus, Monkoff Swain, McCook, Van Newkirk, no, Mayor Barnhart, and Penrod. Number 1 carries. Number 2, limiting additional dwelling units to 1 per dwelling. Let's not have too much discussion, but I'll ask for discussion on the motion. Seeing none. Oh, pardon me. Yes, I apologize. Thank you. Is a member of council willing to move option number 2? Councilor Newkirk, please.
Yeah, Mayor, I would move that bylaw 1055-24 land use bylaw amending bylaw be referred back to administration for further information and report by the end of Q4 2024 on the following. Number 2, limiting additional dwelling units to 1 per dwelling. Thank you.
1 per dwelling. Thank you, Councillor. Brief discussion on the motion.
Yeah, this motion along with the next are a redo on September 5th, 2023, where we were presented with a bunch of options and they were cascading options at that time. So basically the omnibus would be 1 per dwelling across the board. Then, the next would give consideration for a different aspect. The next would give consideration for a different aspect. So that's how these flowed together that night, and that's how I've re-put them on the floor. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Monkoff Swain, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Councillor Monkoff Swain.
Yeah, I'll be voting against this motion. In our current package that we have in front of us, it provides a whole bunch of information. We heard from the public all the way through, I think asking that question again. Yeah, I don't know if we need additional, I don't support 1. So I'll be voting against that. I don't think I need any more information on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I as well. I know this is just asking for a report, but I can't in my heart vote for this because to me it would be counter to what we've heard, not just tonight, but we've heard throughout the years in terms of the affordable housing that's needed in our community. Young people want to stay here, older people want to live here with their families. I think having this ability, we've moved in this direction and this would be a step backwards, so I will not be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod, quickly, please.
Hey, so just want to clarify, Councillor Monkoff Swain, I think you voted in favor of number 1. And if I heard Ms. Raymond correctly, the same information that you just referred to is also included in all the reports that are before us. So I don't understand that there would have been additional information brought forward from one over two. So my interpretation is that you were in favor of number one simply because it's a report for information. So just wondering if you could clarify that for me. Why are you in favor of information on one but not the other?
Okay, let's not get too much into, but question each other's.
Yeah, no,
purpose-
I'm
just trying to understand.
He's
Yeah.
challenging me, that's fine.
Quick question, quick answer.
You know, I'm not quick. One is new information. That wasn't in the report that I saw last year. Number 2, 3, 4 are. So what Nathan brought forward, sorry, what Councilor Tellenbros brought forward was additional information outside of what I've already seen before and what is seen in the package. Number 2, I've seen that before, so I don't need any new information on that.
Thank you. All right, I'll have a quick comment myself too, and then we'll go to the vote. I also won't be supporting the motion because I thought going from 4 to 3, our discussion last year was a good idea, and it came back in the bylaw this evening for all the right reasons. So having said that, I'll call now for the question on item number 2. Council, please vote. And that motion is defeated. 4-3, Councilors Barnhart, myself, Monkoff, Swain, and McCook are no. Van Newkirk, Tellenbos, and Penrod, councilors are in favor. So we'll go to the next motion, and council, we don't need to read the bylaw. For experience, I'll just simply move the numbers as we need to do. I move that limiting additional dwelling units for front attached garage product to 1. Discussion on the motion. Councilman Newkirk, you brought this forward, so your chance to discuss it. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing additional to say on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion from members of council on this one? All right, seeing nothing further. Council, would you please vote on number 3 on the screen before you? All right, that carries in the positive, 4-3. Councilors Penrod, Tellenbos, McCook, and Van Newkirk are yes. Councilors Barnhart, Monkoff, Swain, and myself are no. That carries 4-3 in favor. Thank you, council. All right, now number 4, limiting additional dwelling units for rear detached garage product to 2 and 1. Sorry, to 2 and requiring 1 to be a garage suite. I misspoke. I apologize for that. Councilor Van Newkirk, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, Mayor, and this one caused a little bit of confusion last time too. So just to be very clear, so we have a detached home with, a basement suite in it. And then in the backyard, we have what administration referred to earlier as the suite above the garage. So specifically, this speaks to 2 with requiring 1 above the garage because, it isn't just a rear detached product with, 2 suites in the home, right? So that's why the demarcation is there because the intent would be 1 ADU in the home, 1 ADU above the garage. So that's why this one was worded in this way. So just for clarity for council.
Thank you, council, for clarifying that. Any further discussion on the motion before I call for the vote? This is on number 4, as I just read about a moment ago. Seeing no further discussion, council, would you please vote on number 4 now, please? Pardon me. This vote carries 4-3 against. Councilors Penrod, Van Newkirk, McCook. Sorry. It's been a long night. The motion is defeated 4-3. I was gonna get that out eventually. 4-3 negative. Councilors Penrod, McCook, and Van Newkirk in favor. Councilors Tellenbos, Monkoff, Swain, Barnhart, and myself no. So the motion is defeated 4-3. All right. Now on to number 5, require 1 parking stall for every additional dwelling unit over 45 meters square. Councilor Tellenbos, you put that back on the page. You wish to speak to it briefly? Your microphone's on if you wish.
Thank you. I kind of spoke to it or alluded to it before, but biggest thing is making sure we have adequate parking spaces for these additional dwelling units that we're potentially proposing.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on this motion? And that carries 6-1 in favor. Just so we're clear. Okay, I said it right. It's been a long night, sorry. Councilor McCook voted against, 6 other members of council voted affirmative. That carries 6-1. All right, we have the last one now. Options and considerations. Sorry, I'll move that options and considerations for further amendments to the land use bylaw that would make implementing the additional dwelling unit at a discretionary use and require public engagement for adjacent residents. Councillor Natelibus, a brief comment, if you will.
Absolutely. I always save the best for last, and I think this one is most important. This comes back to the engagement of the affected community. So making sure that we have that discussion and see if it will negatively impact or potentially positively impact the affected individuals. So just making sure we have that communication.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, members of council, would you please vote on item number 6? And that motion is carried 6-1 in favor. Mayor Daniluk in opposition. That carries 6-1. All over the map. All over the map. You gotta love that. Okay, so having said that, we have a couple of things here to figure out. What are the next steps with the existing bylaw this evening? And once we determine this, I'm going to adjust our agenda to move this topic along and then bring our consultants in and move 8.3 up in order to allow our consultants to come in and present their information. And we're here for the duration, they're not. So Madam Clerk or CEO Schwartz, what's the next steps here after this?
Just to clarify, and we'll go back to the clerk for the next steps on the land use bylaw. We have 2 sets of consultants that are waiting. So a suggestion I was going to make after we get through this item is perhaps we pull one of the items off, the financial engagement piece, and have that come back in the fall. And we could send those consultants home. We just sent them to have a coffee and they're waiting for a text, and we have another one online to present the remuneration. So
okay, I'm sorry. I was only on the
this.
question. We had 1 consultant. We have 2 this evening. Okay. All right, we'll do that. Okay, Madam Clerk, how do we proceed next based on the motion we just carried? And how does it put us in terms of the public of hearing and the best of the balance of bylaw 1055-24? Madam Clerk.
Council has referred the bylaw back to administration.
Okay.
The public hearing is still open.
Right.
When administration brings their report back, the public hearing can reconvene. And then once council has gotten all the information that they think they need, can close the public hearing and proceed with 2nd and 3rd reading at that time.
At that later time. Thank you very much. That's what I thought. Just made it clear for the record. So we have now dealt with item 6.1, our agenda. Move on to our next item on the agenda. So Mike, just to clarify, Madam Clerk, we're going to push Mr. DeBlanco. Thanks for coming, Curtis, by the way. Appreciate it. 8.2, we'll push that to a later meeting. CEO Schwartz, which one are we going to deal with first?
The suggestion I would make is that we remove 8.3 and bring it back to a later date. We proceed with 8.1 and we can likely get through 8.2. And that's probably it. We've got 4 consultants that just went off to have a coffee from BA that we would then send home.
Okay,
Bring it back.
so just so we're clear then, so 8.3 will be moved to a future date?
That's what I'm
8.3
suggesting.
in entirety? Okay, and we'll deal 8.1, 8.2 this evening, correct?
That's what I'm hoping we can get through.
Okay, Madam Clerk, do I need to make a motion to adjust our agenda, or can you simply do it? Just so we're clear.
You can make a motion to postpone those items.
Okay, I'll make a motion then that we postpone item 8.3, Community Financial Sustainability Update, to the next available meeting of council in the fall of in Q3, I guess, right? It'll be Q3 starting in July. We're in Q3 already. Who knew? Is that sufficient motion, Madam Clerk? Mike, that's sufficient? Yeah, okay. So once the motion's on the screen, we'll have one last look and then we'll vote on it and move things forward. Try and curtail it a bit for expediency. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just maybe re-clarify, Madam Clerk. I move that item 8.3 be moved to a future date in Q3 2024. Discussion on the motion, members of council. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion to move the agenda item to a later date? And that carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor of the motion. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda then will be items 8.1. Are we going to 8.2? Which is easier for us to do, Madam Clerk? 8.1? That's what I assumed. All right. 8.1, options for amendments to elected officials, nomination policy. Ms. Montney, I believe you'll be presenting. We have seen the report, so I feel free to be brief in your presentation if you need to be. We may have some questions, of course. And council, what we're going to do is when the report is completed, the presentation completed, any questions from council, we'll go through the options individually. Council prefer to vote on option A, B, and C in the report as on A, B, and D as individual motions. So Madam Clerk's already aware of that. So Ms. Montney, you have the floor. Let me find the right mic for you there. Give me a second. Where are you there? It's not coming on. Can you hit the mic? If you don't mind hitting the button there. Okay. Yes, your microphone's on now, Ms. Montney.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Donna Montney, Director of People Services. Thank you for having me to present the options for your consideration regarding the amendments. I'm joined by Joanne Dargy, Director of Legal and Legislative Services, and Pamela Walters from P. Walters Consulting is joining us on the phone, I think. We kicked her
I
out.
should be there.
Okay, thanks, Pam.
Yep.
So earlier this year, we hired P. Walters Consulting to complete an independent review of the elected officials' remuneration policy. The review relied on data from comparable municipalities, and the findings were presented to the Committee of the Whole for information at the April 16th meeting. While the review did not include significant changes to the city's approach to remuneration for elected officials, there are several recommended changes which council is being asked to decide tonight. I'll go over these briefly, but all of the options being presented for consideration align with the recommendation arising from the independent review. It's important to note that option A in the report addresses a central recommendation arising from the review of adopting a compensation philosophy of the 60th percentile of the comparator municipalities. The other recommendations are aligned with this compensation philosophy. Options B and C is regarding the approach to increases. Administration is recommending option B, where the review would take place in the third year of the elected official's term, and any impacts out of the review would be implemented at the beginning of January of the fourth year term of current council. This recommendation links the increases to solid data in real time. And then options D, E, and F are regarding the adjustments to pay throughout the elected term and the frequency of wage reviews. We're recommending option D to allow for adjusting to changes in the market. These three options are all suggesting that increases are based on market data after a review. So option D is a review every second year, option E is every 4 years, and option F is every year. Option G is maintaining council pay but harmonizing to the deputy mayor pay. This means that councilors will receive the same pay throughout their term and will not receive an increase while acting as deputy mayor, as it would be built into the regular council pay. And then options H, I, J, and K are making adjustments to the non-traditional benefits and retirement benefits to align with the 60th percentile of the compensation philosophy. And finally, option L is directing administration to prepare a report and bylaw for parental leave for elected officials. There are some minor financial impacts depending on the options that council chooses. These impacts will be built into future operating budgets, and the specific impacts are noted in the report for the options that administration has recommended. This slide doesn't really we're going to go through them individually now. But yeah, questions?
Phone's off myself. Thank you, Ms. Monty. Appreciate that. Any questions from council on the presentation? See none. Councilman Goff Swain, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. And I have some thoughts around the process here. So fundamentally, option A talks about the 60th percentile. And I think my discussion here on option A also impacts option C, D, E, and F. So I'll speak to that first. Generally, I think percentiles of comparative markets are helpful, but I don't think it's what our policy should be aligned to. There's so many different things that change, whether it's Leduc, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, everyone's in a different situation. I think getting the comparators is helpful, but if we align our policy to it, then we're tied to it. I would much rather the language be to say something like competitive market criteria. That then allows us to still get the information on every 4 years around the comparison, so that next council can make that decision. But if we hit 60th percentile, then there is no chance to make adjustments up or down, right? Because it's outside our policy. So I think this policy is too prescriptive. I think percentiles helpful, additive, but if we put that in the policy, then nothing changes. So for me, I would rather the policy come and speak to having a competitive market. And I think that's in line more with how administration runs through it, as opposed to picking a percentile. This would then allow council, like the process to, like we do every year at budget, have the ability to go up or down and still be within the policy. So I'm not saying 60th percentile is not the right target. I just don't think it should be 60 or 50 or 70. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying if we have market competitive, that gives us the flexibility to have the conversations that we want. So I'll pause there, because that impacts, then that basically crosses out C, D, E, and F.
Right. Yep, that's fine. Did you want to make we're going to go through, I mentioned 4 options. The recommendation is A, B, D, G, H, and so on down. We're going to go through each of those individually.
Yeah, so
you want to make an amendment to option A?
I think if option A, and then that subsequently cuts out option D, E, and F, because all of those are tied to the 60th percentile. Basically, if we change the philosophy to target a competitive market, then we don't need D, E, and F. That's how I think about that.
Right. I understand what you're saying. So did you want to make a motion then to change option A to say something competitive as opposed to 60th percentile?
That's right.
Okay. Do you have a motion prepared?
You would have hoped I would have, to help.
No, that's
form
okay.
the
I was
strategy.
asking just in case Madam Clerk had it handy.
No, and that's my fault. I apologize.
It's just no matter, maybe 1 or 2 word changes, so.
It's just one word change, but it.
Okay. Madam Clerk. Can you put option A?
I will put the recommendation that was up on the screen, and then maybe Councillor Monkhouse-Swain can help me with the
Yeah.
motion that he was
Okay.
looking for.
Thank you.
So we can't touch any of that. First of all, that looks like offsite levies.
Oh, wonder why that's there,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. We could talk offsite levies. I'd love to get into that.
Sure.
You had enough tonight?
Not a new kind of words today. Did you just want to maybe, there's option A in the report. You just want to maybe just change a couple of words in that?
Align the target to be a competitive market. Analysis. To be competitive, simple as that.
Thank you, Counselor.
And just to speak to that.
Yeah, please-
I'll try
please
not to be
speak to it, yeah.
repetitive. It doesn't say, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use 60th, that's a data point.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is if we have this motion, that allows the flexibility to go up or down moving forward. And we still get that report every 4 years. And we go through that process in the year before the next election. I think this just gives us more flexibility to make adjustments up or down.
Thank you. I agree with you. Other members of council? Questions? Or sorry, discussion on the motion, please. Sorry, I said that poorly. Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor. Oh, sorry. Now you do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Monkoff Swain, for the explanation. I wasn't quite grasping what you were saying until it came here and your last piece came out as the thought. So I'm following what you're saying now. So initially I wasn't quite sure. Thanks.
Councilor Barnhart.
I'm not quite there yet, thank you. I'm not understanding what that actually would mean. And I wonder if it's appropriate to ask the consultants if they could clarify that in light of what they've seen in other areas, other municipalities. How would this actually look? What would it tell us in terms of what going forward? Because one of the things I think is really important we avoid is that it looks like we're deciding our own salaries. And that's why we have an outside objective. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, Councillor Monkoff Swain, but I would like to hear how this would work so that I could feel justified in terms of we've hired these individuals in this company to do the work. I'd like to know their take on the suggestion.
CEO Schwartz, I know the consultants are a tool. CEO Schwartz.
Sure, I'll start on what I understand and maybe share a little bit about what administration has done, and then I welcome the consultant to weigh in as well and say what's actually right. We found from an administrative perspective that the comparables that we were using were putting us at a disadvantage. And we had incorrectly set a percentile that didn't allow us to compete in the market. And in fact, it reduced the quality of people who were interested in coming to work for us. So we adopted a new term, which is becoming more popular in salaries, and that's competitive. So competitive gives us and would give council the flexibility to look at the comparators if they so choose, but to also have some ability to set a wage to attract, I'm just going to say, a higher quality of candidate. I know I had a conversation earlier today with Councillor Monkoff Swain. I believe that's what he's trying to do is leave Beaumont as a leader here and instead of just a follower or a comparator, because what we found is that the comparators are becoming less and less accurate.
Councilor Monkoff Swain.
I would just add, it kind of addressed it further down in G, right? But just to be clear on the intent here, and I don't want to jump to G. What G is suggesting is increasing council salaries by about 20K. I'm not supportive of that. So this is more a reflective of making sure we have the ability to set what I think is the most important position here, which is the mayor's salary at the right number. We all know that if we say the 60th percentile, right now the mayor isn't going to hit that number, and not you personally, but the mayor role. And so what I'm trying to do here is provide that flexibility that yes, we absolutely use the percentile as guidance. That is an option. But I would like to not increase council salaries in order to Mike's point, make sure that we're attracting the right candidate. And I'll speak to more about that when we get into mayor and council salaries. But I just think from a policy perspective, if we just have 60th percentile, which this report is saying, then there's no point doing any review. The admin just churns it out, and the mayor's salary never gets an increase for the next 15 years or whatever that is until it gets up to 60 or drops down to 60. So I'm trying to create an opportunity for flexibility, and at budget, we go through that discussion using that information as report.
Thank you. Councillor Telebas, your hand's up.
Thank you, Counselor Monkoff Swain. Although I see where you're coming from, I just hate having a qualitative value put on something that should be more quantitative. It's just open to interpretation. And I mean, obviously not that anyone on council will run away with the concept, but it's just too open and allows the ability to create a number. So whether it's the 60th percentile or a different percentile, I do feel like we should have a bit of a number set so that we know where we're at as opposed to it being discretionary.
Could I help by saying, you know, with consideration, like add to that? So align the target market to be competitive with consideration to the 60th percentile, and then that at least, is that enough to get you there? Like to say, okay, like this is roughly where we want to be, but it's not embedded in our policy, and it's a number, and you can't never touch it.
And just for clarity, I mean, this is solely a recommendation. Should council choose to go outside of that, that opportunity exists too, correct?
For sure, but my problem is that a lot of councillors will say, well, that's not our policy, so therefore I'm voting against it, right? And then we all have to go and spend the whole time in changing the policy to make a little tweak here or there, up or down.
Okay. Yeah, I will support that modification, but I will also make it clear it's not my intention to seek additional funds either. So it's, yeah, but thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mayor Daniluk, if I could weigh in as well. It's Pamela Walters.
Sure, briefly, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So just to Mike Schwartz's comment earlier, a lot of administration compensation philosophy is sort of set to competitive, and then there's a lot of flexibility. Council compensation does operate a little bit differently. I apologize, I didn't kind of grab which councillor had spoken just previously, but to their point around you know, the quantitative versus qualitative aspect, I think that if council doesn't make it a little bit more quantitative, they run the risk, this council or future councils run the risk of whether they engage an external individual or whether they ask administration to do it on their behalf or whether you look at a task force, it doesn't matter. They're going to be looking at the data and trying to figure out what competitive actually means. So they're going to have to come back, if it's left qualitatively, they're likely going to have to come back to council at the beginning of the process and set that at each time a survey or a review is done, which could potentially mean that by different councillors being on council, that each time this is done, if it's only done once every 4 years, that mark potentially, we don't know, could change because somebody on council may determine and council may agree that competitive in 1 year is 50th percentile, competitive in another year is 60th, competitive in another 75th. So you do run a bit of a risk about leaving it a little open. Councillor, sorry, I'm just trying to keep track of everything. I'm a little offline here. I think Councillor Monkoff Swain had indicated that maybe adding a little wording choice there potentially might assist. I agree it might assist. You still run, though, the risk of not necessarily knowing what that mark is. We want to also be careful, since we did start at the beginning of the process, looking at the broader market that was defined as the comparator municipalities that were of like size and similar composition to the city of Beaumont, that you don't end up potentially cherry picking within that. So, you know, the higher you go up in percentages, mathematically, the less municipalities you're actually looking at. So, you know, if you're going from median to 60th to 75th to 90th, you've reduced the number of municipalities that are actually producing that sample size. I hope that makes sense. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. If I could just pose the question to our consultant, I believe it's Ms. Wallen. It's my reading of the report, but if you could just confirm it for us tonight, the recommendation, what is your recommendation as the contracted experts consulting for council as to what the policy should be? I think I just heard you say it, but if you could say it again.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so Our recommendation through the report was that we were looking at the 60th percentile based on the fact that there was an alignment with the administrative policy around that, and that again, council and administration compensation are not exactly the same. So where administration might have a slightly more kind of open-ended swing, usually what that means is we have a position that's a minimum and we have the flexibility to adapt up as opposed to down. Typically, you don't see that adapting down in that same respect as the market continues to get tighter and tighter. So our recommendation would be to align to the 60th, which is at the minimum of what the municipality currently has in consideration from what we understand.
Thank you. Yeah, so we often say around this in council chambers here that, you know, we're not experts in these matters, and we're going to consult with experts and rely on their expert feedback. And so I think that I'm satisfied with what's here as an amendment or a proposal from Councillor Monkoff Swain, because the 60th percentile number is in there, but that's my, I think it is important to Councillor Tellenboss's point that we have as many quantitative pieces in the policy as possible to ensure the public that no one's putting their thumbs on the scales of compensation. And I'll say more about that later on some other pieces here, but ultimately we can create policies with the intention of ensuring that their quality candidates can come forward. But ultimately, it's not council that decides who the best candidates are. It's the public through our elections that does that, right? And these decisions we're making tonight will have some impact on who will put their names forward. And I think we want to give considered careful thought to it in that regard. I don't want to be creating barriers for people to enter. But I also don't think, I know there's at least 2 councillors in the room who had no idea the position of councillor was even paid before they sent their name forward. So I don't think we all want to always presume that remuneration or compensation is the only reason why people might put their name forward or not. I think we want to have folks in these chairs that are committed to public service and committed to keeping the cost of that public service in line. This is my chance to say it in this point, so I won't say it again or later on. Reviewing the past elections going back to especially 2010 and 2013 were kind of a new threshold. I won't go all the way back and bore you with all the details, but in 2021, we had 5 candidates for mayor. In 2017, we had 6 candidates for mayor. In 2013, we had 3 candidates for mayor. In 2023, we had 10 candidates for council. In 2021, we had 15 candidates for council. In 2018, 8. In 2017, 20. So we're not starved for candidates to consider putting themselves forward for these positions. And again, it's not for me to decide who the quality of candidates are. The electors do that on election day. So my concern is actually a little different with the 60th percentile, is that there's not built into this formula a bit of inflationary pressure, because Beaumont's, if we adopt the 60th percentile, Beaumont is putting ourselves in a position of kind of leading the pack. And to the extent that others in the region or other comparators do that, by virtue of that, we'll chase each other and we'll create that inflationary pressure to push elected officials' salaries up. That being said, 60th is what the experts have recommended, and so that's the number I come back to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Monkoff Swain, followed by Councillor Barnard, followed by Councillor Newkirk. Councillor Monkoff Swain.
Yeah, the unintended consequences of the 60th percentile means the mayor's salary doesn't change, no merit in 10 years. That's what that does. And so when you're talking about the unintended consequences, that I'm worried that people are going to look at that and if they're thinking about making role, it's a full-time position, right? Councillors, I 100% agree, right? But if you're making a commitment to either change your job or start a new career, and you see that this role isn't getting any increase for 10 years over that length of time, that's when I worry about people not stepping forward. So what this does, it still hits the 60th percentile and still, uses the consultant's recommendation. It just gives us a bit of flexibility should we want. That's all I'm asking for is flexibility. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnett, followed by Councillor Newkirk. Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the point of view that's been brought forward by Councillor Monkoff-Swain. And I don't in any way want this to be misconstrued as not supporting the mayor and the full-time job and the fantastic job you're doing, Mayor Daniluk. But I won't be supporting the amendment. I believe we do ourselves and our residents a disservice if we choose to alter the recommendations after hiring independent contractors. And we've done that deliberately. We have a policy so that we don't put ourselves in that position. And I think by passing this motion, we'd be putting ourselves right back where we don't want to be. And that is for our residents to be thinking that we're making these decisions on our own without consulting with the experts in the field. I think we've asked for the input on the comparators. Council had much input into who the comparative municipalities would be. We've been kept in the loop throughout the entire process. And I think we would just be opening the door for criticism, which we would deserve if we were to take this step and actually align it in a loose enough way that we could change the results based on our perception. So while I appreciate where it's coming from, I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newkirk, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make a point maybe to that, and then I'll go to where I was going to go. That's where I was too when I started the conversation. But I think for me, with the addition of, with consideration of the 60th percentile, is for me what allows that sober second thought. So that's kind of where I was struggling understanding where this was coming from. You notice earlier I said I understood. I didn't say whether I supported or not. The second piece is kind of what got me to the support. So, and then where I was going to go before Councillor Barnhart said that is, I just want to acknowledge up front, like this conversation takes a solid understanding of the concept, and B, confident councillors to talk about it. This is a difficult subject. Unfortunately, as I've said, I don't know what this will be, the fourth conversation publicly talking about remuneration. It's uncomfortable, but this is the mechanism for this conversation, is for council to talk about what they're paid. So, that's that point, and it completely agrees with what Councillor Barnhart said around, this is the process. These are the consultants that do it. So, I'll just reiterate again, this takes a strong, confident council to have the solid conversation that's required on this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, for those comments, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, it's your motion. Your last comment comes to you.
Yeah, I mean this with all due respect to the consultant, but and then I say but. Council directed, we chose the 60th percentile. With all due respect, what the consultant did is just got all the information and provided that comparative for us, right? It's council's decision to choose that 60th percentile. So by saying this is not following an expert's report, the expert is compiling the data, right, for us. We've said these are the communities that we want to be compared to, and we want to target 60th percent. What they did is went out and got that information and put it in a package in front of us. So by aligning and here, it shows the consideration to the 60th percentile, which is what we did, but it's certainly not going against an expert. It's different than a land use bylaw expert to come in who's got background in the field around ADUs and all that sort of stuff versus collating information and putting it in front of council. That's what the report did, is it followed what we said. Hey, can you please go and look at the 60th percentile with these communities? They got that information and share that with us for our awareness. So anyway, I'll leave it there. I think it's probably time to vote on that one.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. So having said that, Council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you, the amended motion before you. Pardon me, my mistake. Councillor Penrod, please. Motion carries 5-2 in favor. Councillors Barnhart and Penrod in opposition. The balance of council, including myself, in favor of the motion. Thank you, council. Next on the report is option B. And so I'll have the option B motion put on the screen, and I'll make that motion and we can discuss the motion on option B. We're going through each of the options individually as council had requested. So I move that the following options set out in the July 23rd, 2024 options for amendments to elected official remuneration policy be approved, option B. And I have no comments to make on it. I simply think I agree with the option, and I'm prepared to be in favor of it. Discussion on the motion on option B, as outlined in the report. See no discussion? Council, would you please vote on option B from the report? Councillor Penrod? Thank you, Councillor Penrod. That motion carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor of the motion. Next on the report is option D, as in Donald, which committee survey elected officials as outlined in the report. I'll make the motion, we can discuss it, that the following options set out in July 23rd, 2024 options for amendments to the council's remuneration policy report be approved, option D, as in Donald. I will not speak to the motion. I will simply allow council members to speak to it. Councilor McCuff-Swain, you have the floor.
Just very briefly, I support this. I just wanted to confirm, when we say conduct a mini survey, that doesn't mean going out and getting more consultants. What is the intention behind mini survey?
Ms. Montney?
That would be us going back to the comparator communities, basically re-asking the wage question and then just putting it into a calculation.
And
So
so-
we could do that internally.
Internally, no additional dollars.
Yeah.
Thank you. I support the motion.
Thank you, Council, for clarifying. That was my interpretation. Will it be a mini survey, not involving a consultant expense? Thank you, Ms. Montney, for clarifying that. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Telebus, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess just looking for clarity here. The mini survey is just asking the question, should we maintain the 60th percentile compensation philosophy, which we've slightly adjusted? Is that correct?
It is correct, yeah. Ms. Montney?
It would be clarifying the council and mayor wages against the other municipalities. So whatever comp philosophy we're adopting, sorry, let me back up. We are recommending that annual increases don't happen to council and mayor pay. And so instead of annual increases, we go and do the mini reviews to make sure we're still following the comp philosophy, where if we only do that review once every 4 years, we're at risk of falling behind. And so this would be us doing an additional review throughout the term to make sure we're still tracking on the comp philosophy. So if the comp philosophy is no longer the P60, that's fine. It would just be aligning with that. So we are going out and basically asking everybody's wages again and making sure we're falling within our comp philosophy. Do we need to make any adjustments?
Perfect. Okay. I guess with that being said, I would like to opt for option E. I think as you enter a role like this, whether you're familiar if there's compensation or not, the expectation shouldn't change in terms of increases. And I'll be especially cautious here because although I appreciate all the work that our administration does, when it comes to budget, I was quick to say we shouldn't necessarily be looking at increases in salary because of the given times. And I don't want it to be an assumed requirement that council gets an increase in salary. I don't think it's appropriate. So I'm going for option E here.
Okay, but you have the choice to vote against option D though, right? That's the option that's on the floor right now. Thank you. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Markgraf Swain. Councillor Barnhart,
Thank you. I have a question for the administration, if I may.
please.
Ms. Monte, how would it actually work that the administration would bring back to council if it's not the 60th percentile, it's an automatic. So now it's competitive salary, not based on or taking that into consideration. Is that every year at budget time then, or every 2 years is what you're saying? The administration would bring forward, here's what we found in the survey, and this is what we think, or is it left up to council to come up with what they think? That's the part I'm wondering, and I think Councillor Markgraf Swain asked the question, were you going to do this internally or were you going to bring in consultants? Tell me how that might work, please.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. The review that we would do every 4 years. So in the 3rd year of the term to be effective January of the 4th term, that would be a review that we would do with a consultant, and we would look at the full total compensation package. The mini reviews throughout the term would just be base compensation. So we wouldn't be looking at things like different benefits and that sort of thing. It would just be your base pay. And then really the 3 options that we have outlined is not doing the mini reviews. E would be just the once every 4 years. In the 3rd term, goes through the budget process in year 3 to be implemented in year 4. If you chose option D, the review would be done in the 1st year of the term to be implemented in January of the 2nd year. Then nothing for the then the review would be done in the 3rd year to be implemented in the 4th year. So that would be looking at the base wage every 2nd year. Or option F is doing that mini review every year. So in the 2nd quarter of the year to go through the budget process in that year to be implemented in January of the following year. Did that make sense?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor.
What really, that wasn't my question about the timing as much as how are you going to determine what salaries you're bringing back if you're not, as quantitative versus qualitative, it's a competitive based on the survey, but then I think the administration you just said you're not relying on consultants to do that work for you. You're going to do it yourselves. So how are you picking what's competitive? Just basically that's an in-house and you'll come into council and council will decide. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. What I think would happen would be that we would run numbers for you on the P60th, the P65, the P70th, and then you can choose.
So council would be choosing themselves. Okay. Thank you.
I think.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Markgraf Swain, followed by Councillor Penrod.
Yeah, just to Councillor Tellenboss's point, I agree. I don't want an annual increase. I think you said it, but the only minor difference here is that admin once a year does a bit of work and they show where council is. So the only difference between D and E, in my view, is that we get a little report that says, okay, council mayor salary is X, council salary is Y, and we could choose to do absolutely nothing with it. And that's what I would probably be in favor of. It's just additional data. They're offering to do it. I'd like them to share it with us. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod, a quick comment if you could, then we'll move on to the vote. We have another motion to go through yet. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to clarify process. If option D here is defeated, then what happens next? So my question is, would we prefer to just vote on option D, or would you entertain a motion to amend suggesting option E or F?
Well, Madam Clerk, go ahead if you want. Go ahead.
6 1/2 dozen of the other. So you could vote on option D, and if it's defeated, someone can make a motion to approve option E.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's the
Thank you,
cleanest
Councillor.
way to proceed then. Just wanted to clarify option F. What I heard Ms. Montney say is not what I understand the report to say, in that option F is not an annual reflection on are we in line with the 60th percentile. It's actually, option F is suggesting wages are adjusted annually on a COLA basis, depending on what is put forward for municipal staff. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are. Sorry, I misspoke on that one. That is basically maintaining current practice.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just will state now, I'll vote against option D. My preference would be option F.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Helbus, a quick comment, then I'm going to go to the vote, please.
Yeah, perfect. I'm just a little confused in the process where there's three options. And if we're going through the first one as option D, it eliminates the potential for the other option. So am I supposed to put a motion for option E?
Nope. Option D was put as a motion on the floor first, as a recommendation in the report, and we're going to vote on it. So option D carries, it carries. If it gets defeated, then option E or F would be available to be made as a motion.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, any further? That covers off everything, I believe. So with that, I'll ask you, council, to vote on option D, as in Donald. That carries 4-3 in favor. Barnhart, Daniluk, Monkoff Swain, and Van Newkirk in favor. Penrod, Natelibus, and McCook in opposition. Motion is carried. Next on the report, recommendation is G, which is the mayor, deputy mayor, councillor compensation area, and it talks about the deputy mayor position. Councillor McCoff Swain, you wish to make a comment? You have the floor on option D in the report. Option G in the report, pardon me.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I spoke about this before. What the report is recommending is increasing councillors' salary by $3,214 or $19,284 total to get up to the deputy mayor role. I'm not supportive of that. I think the council salary should stay the same. I've been through the deputy mayor role several times. Yes, there is a little additional work. I think Councilor McCook did her fair share of that. I think extenuating circumstances. I don't think that justifies an additional $3,000 each per person. So I would recommend that council salary stays flat. The intention, and it's not going to be in there tonight because we'll get to it at budget, by saving that 20,000, my intention at budget would be to look at an increase to the mayor's salary down the road. But for this, I don't support that increase for council. I think council should be kept whole. I don't think we need to debate here tonight around the mayor's increase, all that sort of stuff. That'll be brought forward at budget, especially now with the adoption of that recommendation. There's the ability to do that. There's also the ability to defeat that. So I would like to amend that option G to remove councillor compensation to equal deputy mayor compensation.
Hey, sorry, just say that. Just say that again, if you could. So you're suggesting that council compensation would not increase the level of deputy mayor, it would stay as it is, and there'd be no bump for each time you do a term as deputy mayor, there'd be no bump there's as currently. Right?
So to Councillor McCook's point in my ear here, if we just voted against it, that's probably the simplest option. Sorry.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're suggesting voting against the motion?
Yeah, let me put the motion on the floor and then I can vote against it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's put option G on the.
Did you already put the motion on the floor?
No, I didn't. I wasn't, sorry, I spent a long night. I missed my procedure there. So Madam Clerk, I will move that option G is in the report. Okay, my mistake for missing that step. So Councillor McCoff Swain has spoken against the motion, and option G, which is to bump every councillor's pay to deputy mayor level for everybody, which would have cost $16,000 more. And if I'm speaking for you, Sam, he's suggesting council would say the same, be no bump becoming deputy mayor. as we've done in previous years. Councillor Penrod, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Telebas, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Councillor Penrod.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Moncuff-Swain. I'm in agreement that there's no need to increase councillor compensation. The rationale given in the report is actually just that it's not usually done that we harmonize to a lower compensation level. We don't need to follow that. But I do want to clarify, are we suggesting voting against this that actually councillors will take a pay cut and lose that amount that's given for deputy mayor? Or is it just that we'll go away from the practice of paying that amount only during the service of deputy mayor and actually just spread that amount over the full course of the council term?
Do you want me to answer that? Or go ahead.
In my view, I don't think there should be additional compensation for deputy mayor. So that's not the status quo. I think council salary should be whatever it is, flat. The deputy mayor, everyone shares in that. We know the number. I don't think it warrants additional.
But your current compensation is not going to be reduced as a councillor. There's
Technically,
no increase to being deputy mayor, but there's no reduction in your current earnings as a councillor, but no additional comp to be deputy mayor.
the way that I'm framing this, there would be a reduction over the 4-year term. It would mean that, let's say it's 42,000, right? So 42 times 4, I'm not going to do that math, Steve. Instead of 42 times 4 plus the 3K that the deputy mayor gets, you just wouldn't get that, is the way that I think about it. It's just 42 flat, whatever the number is for the 4-year term. And the deputy mayor doesn't get that additional stipend.
So given the timelines that we've adopted back in B, then these will all go into effect in January. Again, we're into a long meeting here, but so would that not mean that every member of council has received that additional pay for deputy mayor, except for whoever serves that last term? Now, that's an awkward thing to say because that will be me. But it's just an equity piece, right? One person shouldn't be paid less than another person for doing the exact same job.
It should start next council.
Yeah, but that's not what we've agreed to in our timeline discussion earlier. All of these changes that we've been in discussion on tonight, this was my pause in voting on B. We're actually changing the way that these things are happening. They won't go into effect when the next council comes on board. They'll actually go into effect sooner than that while this council is still sitting. The only reason I voted for option B was because I'm fundamentally against voting for my own pay increase. And Councillor Barnhart's spoken eloquently to that tonight. However, I think the trade-off there is we'll all be held accountable in a very easy way. Well, so that's not what we've agreed to already though, passing B. So that's my point of clarification is like, what exactly are we voting on from administration's perspective for this one?
Oh, Ms. Montney?
If you just vote this one down, it does maintain just status quo. And so we would still have the 2 different pay rates for councillor and deputy mayor throughout the term for those 8-month rotations.
Okay.
Madam Clerk.
And just to add to that, if I understand correctly, if you actually want to eliminate the deputy mayor compensation, we just need a separate motion for that. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Penrod, anything further?
Nope.
Thank you. Councillor Telebas, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Councillor Telebas, you have the floor.
Just short and sweet. I won't support this motion. I don't think there's value in adding increase to current salary. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I find myself trying to be consistent, and it's difficult in this conversation because I do believe that the recommendations came forward from the consultants were were fair, and they certainly, when I read the report, and I looked at it from the perspective of what there's happening out there in the other municipalities, and it kept us out of this very conversation that we're having, and we're going to have more of, and future councils will have more of. I think council's doing exactly what I wanted to avoid by having this come to us in an objective manner, and I find myself on the side of voting for this option because I do think that it's fair, and I think it's based on doing what comparative municipalities are doing as well. So I know it seems odd because honestly, I didn't think that we needed to increase our salaries at all for either council or mayor, but I was content to see that the experts felt that this would be fair. So on the basis of that, I'll be voting for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod, a follow-up question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I was a bit dismissive in just mentioning that the report suggests that it's not usually done if you're harmonizing, that you harmonize to a lower compensation level. However, the report sort of doesn't follow its own advice in that what they returned in the report is that the proposed change that would have come or would come if we adopt G, the proposed change would put councillor compensation in Beaumont at 8% above the 60th percentile. So it is just kind of ignoring its own advice, given that usually people don't opt to harmonize down. And so that's where I was suggesting that I would be okay with going against their advice on that count.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All right, Council, would you please vote on option G as in George? All right, that motion is defeated, 6-1. Councillor Barnhart in favor, other 6 councillors in opposition. So the motion is defeated, which means status quo. Hang on, did I have that right? Hang on. Okay, if you voted 6 no. Okay, so the motion, option G is not. No change, status quo. Okay, thanks. I just had a brain fart there for a moment. Okay, next on the list of options here is option H, which is the increased connectivity allowance. I'll make that motion. We can discuss it briefly. I move option H under the report. Discussion on the motion on option H, increasing connectivity allowance. Seeing no discussion on the motion, Council, would you please vote on the motion? And that carries 1, 2, 3, 4 yes and 3 no. Yes is Penrod, Barnhart, myself, and Councillor McGough-Swain. Opposition is Hellebuss, McCook, and Van Nieuwkerk. Motion is carried 4-3. Next is option I, introduce a wellness spending account of $500 per year as per the report. I'll move that motion, option I, to move things along here. I will not discuss. I will not speak to the motion. I'm in favor of it. Councillor McGough-Swain, you have the floor on option I.
So the way I read this is that all 7 of us get a $500 per year spending account, wellness spending account?
Correct.
So in my opinion, I think the mayor as a full-time position should get it. I don't think councillors as a part-time role should get it. So I would like to update this and put the motion on the floor that introduce a wellness spending account for the mayor's position of $500 per year.
Or would it be easier to, just suggestion is vote on the motion, and if it gets defeated, oh no, that one, sorry.
It's the same way.
I know what you're saying. I'm just pooped. Sorry, we're all pooped, and I appreciate everyone's stamina.
It's just an amendment to the motion that says for the mayor. And if you think If you agree with that, it should just be the mayor, then vote yes. If you disagree and you shouldn't be just the mayor or shouldn't be anyone, then you vote no.
Okay. Are we clear on what the amendment is? And I'll have Councillor Penrod and Councillor Telebas speak to I and the amended motion. Councillor Telebas, you have the floor first.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of had discussion on that before it was converted, but I just don't think that an increase is warranted at this point in time. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Penrod.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to absorb the amendment to, so I just want to point out that under our current practice, the mayor is already enrolled in a health and dental program. And that all counselors have the option to enroll at our own expense. And currently, 5/6 of counselors don't avail themselves of that option. So I don't see a pressing need to adopt this, including the amendment. I'm having to process that bit on the fly, but.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Barnhart. Oh, hang on. Your mic is now on.
Thank you. Councillor Penrod kind of went where I was going, and that was going to be my question: is the fitness pass still available to councillors? One of the people that doesn't take advantage of it, but I know it's there, and I appreciate that it is. So I was just wondering then if this is coming from. Is this coming from the consultants, or is this basically the administration is finding this would be a better way to do it rather than having access to the fitness center?
Ms. Montney?
The Beaumont Sports and Rec Fitness Center is a separate program. This program would allow you to claim expenses as a taxable benefit to maybe other gyms or equipment that you need to buy for your house, or if you didn't get full vision coverage, it could top up your vision coverage that you have. It would be items like that.
So was it comparative to other municipalities, or was this a one-off? This
was in the report as other municipalities offer.
Came from that
Yes.
perspective as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, council, would you please vote on motion I on the screen? The motion carries 5-2 in favor. Councilors Penrod and Telebas in opposition. Motion carries 5-2 in favor. Thank you, council. Next, I believe going down the list here is option J. I'll make the motion for option J. And option actually, Ms. Montney, J and K are kind of tied together, are they not essentially? Your microphone is on.
So option J is basically maintaining the current retirement plan for the full-time elected officials, so the mayor.
Right.
That is currently in policy and really changes can't be made to it at this time. But it's talking to when there is a change in the full-time position, that at that time it would harmonize to what the part-time elected officials retirement plan is, so that there isn't two different plans running.
Right.
And so then K is introducing a retirement savings for all of the part-time elected officials of providing 5%.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. So are we going to then do option J and K together? I don't think so. So option J is first, right? Okay. Councilman Gosselin, you wish to speak to option J?
Yeah, sorry, I support J, I don't support K. So I just wanted to make sure we were.
Right.
Good
That was
there.
my understanding too.
So I don't need to speak to it.
Yeah. Okay. Any discussion on option J? Seeing none, council, would you please vote on option J? Thank you, council. That carries 6-1 in favor. Councilor McCook in opposition. I think you meant yes. Yeah, I thought you meant yes. Yeah, I heard you say yes. And you went, oh shit. I mean, no, she went unfortunate, no. So I'm going to overturn the visual vote on no, because Councilor Cook did say, oh, no. I heard her say that. So we hit the wrong button. It happens at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. It happens. So the motion is carried unanimously 7-0 in favor of the motion. Thank you. Option K then. Option K, I'll move option K. And as Ms. Mutney offered, it would change the mayor's pension plan to become matching. It's 5% with the elected officials. Oh, part-time, sorry. Yeah, mine doesn't change. Yeah. Okay, so discussion on the motion for option K. Which introducing a 5% retirement plan. No discussion? Okay. Council, would you please vote on option K? That carries unanimously 7-0 in opposition. So it's a no vote? Yeah. It's defeated. Sorry. All right, let me try that one more time. It's 7-0 in defeating the motion. Motion is not carried. So option K does not proceed. And I believe that is we have option L, which is the parental leave discussion in the report. So I will move option L on the parental leave. I have no intention I don't need to discuss it. So discussion on the motion of L from members of council. Councilor Cook, you have the floor, followed by Councilor Penrod.
I'm not sure where people are on this, so I just wanted to speak that I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's important to have something in place for parental leave. I know I've spoken to other elected officials who went to go on parental leave and their councils did not have something in place, and you're kind of left scrambling to figure it out. So I think it's important to have this for anything that occurs in the future. At least we have some parameters and some direction for what will happen.
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate those comments. Councilor Penrod, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I won't belabor it, but speaking strongly in favor of option L, I think this is one way that we remove a barrier to entry for candidates who would otherwise consider putting their name forward to serve on council or as mayor. And so strongly in support of option L.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Council, let's have you vote on option L. And that carries unanimously in favor, 7-0. Motion passes. And that concludes, I believe, this section of our agenda. Thank you, Ms. Monty, for your help here. We are now moving on to 8.2, the quarterly financial report. Mr. DeBlanco, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good evening to the Mayor Council. I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the Director of Finance for the city. Tonight I'll be presenting the quarterly financial report for Q2 2024. Report provides a mid-year update on the city's budgets, as well as recommends one amendment to the approved 2024 capital budget. Looking first at the city's municipal budget, I'll draw council's attention to page 2 of attachment 1. As of the end of June, administration is forecasting to have a net surplus of approximately $617,000 on overall revenue. This net surplus is attributed to several categories, but notable ones are licenses, permits, and fines, and franchise fees. The city's planning and development department is forecasting 50% beyond the budgeted revenue for permitting, and franchise fee revenue is trending 6% beyond budget, and this is driven from growth in the city. Administration is forecasting to require $627,000 beyond the budgeted operating expenses. There's some large variances, as we can see on that page 2 at the department level, but overall operating expenses are forecast to be at approximately 1% over the approved budget. On some of the bigger variances on the finance department, we see an underspend there, and that pertains to the financial ERP system project.
The guests that are in attendance?
No, we'll deal with this first. We may adjust our agenda after that, but we'll deal with this first. Thank you.
That's all right.
Terrible.
Administration is currently in the process of selecting an implementer for the selected software. And it's expected that those project costs will be requested to be carried forward into 2025. Notable overages are seen in planning and development. Additional staffing and contracted services have been required to meet the permitting volume we've seen in the year, as mentioned already. And the increased revenue generated by the department offsets these additional costs. Infrastructure department's forecasting to require 510,000 beyond budget on operating expenses. This is driven from a variety of factors, but specifically escalating repairs and maintenance within city facilities.
Oh, yeah.
Overall, administration's forecasting a net deficit of 312,000 on the municipal operating budget. Next, looking at the utility operating budget, summary of which is on page 3 of attachment 1. The utility operating budget generates revenue by setting rates in order to recover the cost to operate and maintain utility infrastructure. Altogether, utility revenue is forecast to be $97,000 above budget, although this additional revenue is expected to be offset by additional operating expenses, specifically installing new and servicing existing water meters. Overall, utility operating budget is a very slight surplus, 13,000 after the reserve transfers of 1.6 billion. On the capital budget, which is page 4, it's expected that 95% of the budget will have been spent by the end of the year. Certain projects not completed by year end, administration's likely to request that those funds be carried forward to 2025. A detailed report on projects specifically was included as tonight's agenda package. On the financial side, one notable variance within the capital budget is on the facility renewal program. It's expected that repairs at the ELCC will be required in the year. So some of the work planned for the year in the facility renewal program is being reprioritized towards this project. If additional funds are required, administration will bring a request to approve an additional reserve draw. At this time, administration is forecasting a net savings on municipal growth of 460,000. Administration is forecasting $130,000 savings overall on the capital budget. There is one recommended adjustment. A report was presented to council at the May 28th meeting on the 46th Avenue redesign and construction project. And a project one pager is included as attachment 2 for this project. Within that report on May 28th was a recommendation to proceed with option 2. The project is for removal of existing median and landscaping between street lighting along 46th Avenue. And like I mentioned, at this time, administration is recommending that the capital budget be amended to include this project and has included the motion to do so in the recommendation of the report. On page 5 of the attachment 1 is the reserve summary. It's anticipated that municipal operating budget will require reserve draws of approximately $1.5 million, which is less than the approved budget, but those dollars would be expected to be shifted to 2025. For capital, 4.7 million is forecast to be required to fund capital renewal as part of the 2024 capital budget. And looking specifically at the reserve balances, we've done a review compared to council policy, and the financial stabilization reserve is forecast to have a balance below optimal, as is the economic development reserve, although it is anticipated that this reserve will be replenished within the year. A few other reserves, namely fleet and equipment and parks, have balances that are below what is expected to be required, the annual allocations are forecasted to not be able to meet the renewal. So part of the work that's undergoing as part of the 2025 budget, administration is undertaking a detailed review of reserve planning and will likely recommend an increased allocation to these reserves, as well as likely some reallocation between those reserves to bring those balances to optimal level. At the end of 2024, reserve balances are forecasted to be approximately $1 million higher than at budget time. Overall, with any budget, whether it's surplus or deficit, there will be a recommendation come at the end of the year for either a draw from reserve or transfer to reserve. For the municipal operating budget, that would be the financial stabilization reserve. For the utility budget, that would be the utility reserve. That concludes my presentation for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate that. For the sake of expediency, I'm going to move the two motions and the recommendation, and then council can discuss the motions on the recommendation. So, Madam Clerk, would you please put the recommendations on the screen? Thank you. That I move that that the July 23rd, 2024 report, quarterly financial report Q2 2024 is received for information, and that the 2024 municipal capital budget be amended by adding funding in the amount of 160,000 for redesign and construction of median on 46th Avenue, as set out in option 2 in the May 28, 2024 report, 46th Avenue redesign and construction project. Questions for administration, discussion on the motions? There's 2 there. Seeing none, Councilor Telebas, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you. Just a quick question, not so much as the received as information or pertaining to the received as information, but more so on the specific project. This was identified in the 2024 budget, is my understanding. In saying that, just curious as to what the urgency is to get this done within 2024. If it wasn't something that was identified as being required, well, it was identified, mind you, sorry, but something that wasn't decided as being required to be completed within 2024 based on council's decision. What's pushing it now?
CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, the main driver is safety. We can't get emergency vehicles down that road. So the other option is that we remove all parking from the road, and that's what council objected to. So they had directed us to come back with an alternative, and this is what we've come up with.
Thank you.
Perfect. Although I support the modification, I feel that it's something that should be put into the 2025 budget and approve it at that point. So I realize it's a requirement. We've gone so far without, well, there have been issues, but not too many issues. So yeah, I feel this is a project that needs to be proposed in 2025. Thanks.
You're free to vote, get the motion going, you can vote against if you want to. That would accomplish that if you want. See no further discussion on the motion? Nope. Councilor Penrod.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification to administration, if this is approved, the 46th Avenue redesign and construction, when is the anticipated completion of the construction portion?
CEO Schwartz.
The end of this construction season, it'll start immediately.
So essentially, approving this and completing it would keep us from having to have a parking ban on that street. Yes. Which we heard plenty of public feedback. And I know we're all about honoring the public feedback. So we heard plenty of that this past year. So I'd like to make sure that we get this decided tonight and move forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Telebas.
Thank you. I know Councillor Penrod's just playing around there, but we will talk about feedback and the feedback we received in regards to budget as well. So I respect both sides of that feedback, and that's one of the reasons I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
All right, boys, let's play nice. All right, any further discussion on the motion? Oh, Madam Clerk. All right, here you go.
I apologize. We did miss putting in the motion a funding source. So if you would entertain a small amendment, we've put the funding source as government transfers.
Okay, I thought it was mentioned in the report, but it needs to be part of the motion.
Should be part of the motion.
Okay, yeah, you can put it in there. I'm fine with that. Just plug it in there. Funded by government transfers. It's okay. I'm fine with that amendment. Friendly amendment. So, one for the discussion, seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion before you? Motion carries 6-1 in favor. Motion passes. Councilor Telebas in opposition. Thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco. Next on our agenda, let me go down here. All right, we don't try to get done by 10 because our meeting bylaw says we have to have a motion go past 10 o'clock, right? So we're going to try and get done before 10 if we can. I'd like to, if we can. Next on our agenda is 8.6, section 347.1, request to waive property tax late payment fees. Roll 004908. Mr. DeBlanco, you'll be speaking to it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before council this evening is a section 347 request. In this particular, council's had an opportunity to read the report and the agenda. In this particular instance, property only had one mailing address specified on that property. And under the MGA, administration needs to mail the property tax notice to the mailing address on file. That was done so. And so for that reason, the request for waiving property tax penalties it's recommended to be waived in this, or sorry, not to be waived, that the request be denied rather.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate that. Discussion or questions from the council for administration? Councilor Telebas, you have the floor.
Perfect, thank you. My intentions in removing this from the consent agenda is just giving the opportunity for any individual that has a concern and they feel it wasn't addressed appropriately, especially when it comes to significant amount of money during, financial hard times, to come forward and present their issue. Unfortunately, when these individuals don't attend these sessions, I have no one to ask questions to for clarification. So, yeah, based on the information you provided, I'm in alignment with the decision, but I encourage anyone who has any concerns to show up in the council chambers and be available for questions because it could potentially alter our decisions.
Fair enough. Thank you. Let's a motion on the screen, please, from the report. And I will move that the request for waiving property tax penalty in the amount of $1,930.47 pertaining to roll 004908 be denied. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the motion? That carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor, motion is carried. Thank you. Next on our agenda is motion following notice of urban reserve opportunities. Councilor McGough-Swain, I believe you have information to present to us. And just so you know, while it's being loaded up, CEO Schwartz has offered to send his report to us by email as opposed to verbal to try and get us out of here by 10 o'clock, which I appreciate. Unless someone really needs to hear it in person, we'll do one by email instead. So in the meantime, Councilor McGough-Swain, I think we're going to have it up on the screen here. This is motion following notice urban reserve opportunities.
Yeah, I'll move the motion first, and then I'll come back to speak to it. Is that?
That'd be fine. Thank you.
So I will move that in support of business attraction, administration look for opportunities for potential partnerships and to further identify any land options for exploring the development of an urban reserve within Beaumont, and that by the end of Q4 2024, a progress report be brought back to council. And I did provide in this package a presentation just to walk through what an urban reserve is and why I think that there is why I'll encourage your support for this motion. So I'm gonna speak to this here, and you can scroll to the next slide, please. So the vision, certainly my vision anyway, is that Beaumont is the first municipality with an urban reserve focused on economic development in Alberta. Next slide, please. The goal short term is to present a vision and sign an MOU with a Treaty 6 nation that they would be interested in partnering with us. Medium term, kind of to work with that nation, the province and the feds to go through the additions to reserve process, which I'll explain. And then the long-term vision is that there is a First Nation who's investing a commercial development in Beaumont on an urban reserve. So what is an urban reserve? It is land within a city that has been purchased on the open market by a First Nation and granted reserve status by the federal government. Land does not become a reserve just because it's owned by a First Nation. It needs to go through that process in order to make it there. So the benefits for the First Nation, why would they do this versus purchasing any land? The big advantage is that the tax exemptions to be able to do this. And so there is no GST during the construction paid for urban reserves, which makes projects more commercially viable. And there's a million success stories out there, which I'll explain to in a second. It really provides an opportunity for nations to invest in markets much closer to populations. I won't get into the Indian Act, but reserves predominantly are located away from urban populations, and nations have capital and often there is a lack of population where their reserves are located. And so this allows them to invest their capital in a more populous space and take advantage of the tax exemptions within the Indian Act. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits to Beaumont? First and foremost, economic development. We're always looking to attract business to Beaumont, whether it's Indigenous or non-Indigenous. This is not the total solution. This is one cog in the wheel to attract business into Beaumont. It's an opportunity to attract a variety of industries. There are specific urban reserves who have specialized in healthcare, who have brought hotels, gas bars, that sort of thing, industrial parks, business parks. And so you can really cater to what you're looking for. And I'll underscore hotel there. And the other part of it is there will be significant provincial and national recognition, right? That's going to again promote Beaumont as a innovative community that is encouraging all sorts of development. The second part of this is just around the economic reconciliation, and I know that word reconciliation gets thrown around a lot, and a lot of Indigenous people are sick of people talking about reconciliation, looking for action, and this, in my view, is action. It's in line with our strategy of being a more inclusive community, and ultimately it provides an opportunity for Indigenous First Nation capital to find a market closer to the populations and then ultimately thrive. So the concept, what does it actually mean? Either Beaumont or a developer sells land to a nation. So it could be us, they could buy it from the private market, and with the purpose of turning it into an urban reserve. That they buy that land either from us or a developer at market price, right? So no different than anyone else. The key point here is that Beaumont and the nation would enter into an agreement in lieu of property taxes. And so that effectively, we would have to figure out that negotiation, but ideally it's in line with the non-residential mill rate, so that Beaumont still would get those property taxes, just in a different way. We'd also enter into a municipal servicing agreement, so things like land use, building standards, protective services, making sure that that particular parcel of land continues to be serviced by Beaumont, and part of those in lieu of taxes compensates for that. Then the nation develops and operates the commercial development and pays the service agreement to Beaumont in lieu of taxes. So, no different than anyone else operating a building or a business, and we get the taxes in front of that. So this isn't new. While this is new for Alberta, this isn't new. This has many success stories across Canada, particularly in BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Just a bit of background, Muskeg Lake was the first one in 1988 to enter into an urban reserve in Saskatoon. There's now 7, and I think just actually moved into 8. Regina, Winnipeg, West Vancouver, all have seen successful developments of this, from gas stations, hotels, office parks, solar generation facilities, etc. The space doesn't look anything different. I've been on several of these. You don't know whether you're on reserve or not. It's really it's trying to take advantage of one of the few benefits of the Indian Act. It's really just an opportunity and to create that space for them. And as I mentioned, those tax advantages, we've tried to attract hotels here several times, and it's hard. We've done everything we can. This is another option here where it essentially cuts the building cost down by 5%, and that can make a business plan go or no go. The next slide shows Saskatoon. I won't belabor it, but this is the real success story. And we've had the city of Saskatoon come speak to Beaumont a bit about this. But they have several reserves here within the city. They've just added a new one in Kakawishta First Nation, who just acquired a 60-acre parcel of land. They got money from the federal government through the Canada Infrastructure Bank to get the utilities and everything like that up and running. And that's a real success story. And the city of Saskatoon is getting significant benefits from that. I will say that there is a really good FAQ on Saskatoon around what urban reserves are. And I may look to amend my own motion to speak to that moving forward. But if you get a chance, take a look at Saskatoon. It's just a great example of how they've created that partnership there. And as I said, as you drive through those reserves, you don't know when you're on reserve or off reserve. It's just a great way to mutually benefit. So I think I've really summarized this, but I think it's just an untapped opportunity in Alberta. There is a lot of Indigenous capital out there. We've got we had Fort McKay First Nation invest in a commercial development for us, residential development, I should say. There is capital out there. I think if we should be at the front of the line for that. I think these are going to be very popular and very common throughout Alberta, like they are in Saskatchewan, BC, and Alberta. And I think we should take advantage of that. And the opportunity to invest their capital away from their home reserves is something that I think lines up with all of our strategies and grows from an economic development perspective and from an inclusive perspective. I have included some slides, some links here on the next slide. I'm not going to go into them. I'd highly encourage folks to read the Saskatoon Urban Reserve FAQs. Take a look at that Kakawis to Howe Landing developments piece there. The City of Edmonton has a strategy around it, so I've included that in there. Yeah, I just wanted to set the context before I speak to my motion quickly there. So with that, maybe we could stop sharing the presentation and fundamentally what I'll go back to is what we're asking of administration here. So what the motion is asking them is to go out and engage nations within Treaty 6, potentially Treaty 8, and just to go out and say, hey, look, Beaumont is open to this concept. That agreeing to this motion doesn't mean that Edmund's going to go away and do a bunch of work and all of a sudden there's going to be an urban reserve pop up. We're not going to have any clue what that means. They're going to go back out to the nations and say, hey, look, if you've got capital, we want your business. And to make that a reality, we're prepared to work with you to turn that into an urban reserve. There's no net negatives for this. We get the return on it. And if a particular nation comes back to us and says, hey, we're interested in that, and then admin goes through that process. Okay, what type of investment are you looking at? That all comes back to council. Before anything we approve it, we've got to go through the municipal servicing agreement. We've got to go through the in lieu of property taxes agreement. All that sort of stuff comes all the way back. What this motion is really doing is just giving administration the direction to go out and engage the nations and see if anyone is interested. If no one comes, then hey, we tried. If we do, we get the chance to look at that. So I'll leave it there, knowing that there may be some comments around and FAQs that'll come with that. So I'll pause there and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. I see a couple of questions coming. I can't see this being done in 6 minutes. I want to make sure the topic gets its proper due attention. So, Madam Clerk, you need to adjust our meeting bylaws by an extra 15 minutes? What do we do here? So we're on side with our own laws, our own rules, I mean.
We don't have to suspend it. We just need a motion to extend beyond 10 o'clock. So I can flash that up.
Okay, I can't just be done in 6 minutes, so I'll roll the dice and make the motion sorry, Sam, but I'll make sure we're on side with your motion and a chance to discuss it properly within our guidelines. So I'll make the motion that we extend our meeting, as you said, Madam Clerk. Yeah, there we are. Beyond 10 p.m. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on the motion to extend beyond 10 p.m.? So we're official. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll continue on with our meeting. I've got Councillor Penrod followed by, Madam Clerk, sorry. Did I miss something?
Yes, sorry, just our Zoom link ends at 10 o'clock, so we'll need a short recess just to reestablish the Zoom link.
Can we do it right now or do we have to wait till 10?
Nope, we can do it right now.
Okay, let's do it right now. We'll take 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. I was just informed it starts at 10, so we have.
Okay, we have time for one question or maybe two?
Yeah.
Okay. Almost a time for a pee break, almost. Didn't quite make it. Councillor Penrod, you have on the floor first.
I just want to thank you, Councillor Moncuff-Swain, for your work on this motion. I couldn't be more strongly in favor of it. I do have some questions, but to your point, I think the questions that I have will be more relevant down the road when we do identify a potential partner and we're negotiating on what that looks like. So I do just want to acknowledge you for the work that you've put into this. You've gone above and beyond just putting the motion on the floor. You've reached out and consulted with people. You've provided a ton of information here, and I really appreciate it. We're on this journey of reconciliation as a city, and we're in the habit of beginning each meeting in public with a land acknowledgement. And I think it's fitting that we close this meeting with this motion. This is, in my mind, a great next step in our reconciliation journey. And it's one of these great opportunities in life where we get to do what's economically great for Beaumont, but we also get to do what's morally right as people, as treaty people, as our land acknowledgement states. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate the brevity. And the comments too, of course, not just, you know what I mean? When I said, you know what I mean? Okay, yeah, you know what I mean. Councillor Newkirk.
More brevity. Thanks, Sam. Yes, here comes potential friendly amendment for creation of an FAQ. I'm not sure how administration would, prefer to word this, but, and that administration create an FAQ similar to Saskatoon that be made available to the public.
I'll accept that.
Okay.
Yeah, and
we'll wordsmith that.
Yeah, and while that's being wordsmith, just for me, I think we owe it to ourselves to examine all opportunities for economic development within the community, and this is one that has come to fruition. And Councillor Malkoff-Swain has done a lot of background on this and provided a lot of information here for the public to review. And I think the information that you provided alongside the FAQ that would be created answers all of the questions I think that anyone would particularly need to know between now and the end of Q4. Because then we're going to get back that report that says, here's what possibilities could be, or we need to do more work, or whatever administration finds. So thank you. Appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sam. Councillor Malkoff-Swain, I guess I thought this was already going across the finish line, so it's good to see that you recognize that it wasn't going fast enough and well enough. So if this is what is needed to get it across, definitely. I've been a supporter of it since you first brought it to our attention, and I too appreciate all the work, the education you provided us on what it is. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Telebus, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you. I guess just a couple of questions, more so starting on the administration side. My understanding was that ECDEVs is doing all they can to obviously try and bring in businesses. Is this not something that was potentially captured, or have any attempts been made to approach a scenario like this?
CO Schwartz.
Yes, we've had several conversations. We brought in Chief Billy Morin last year or the year before to do a presentation, but at that point we were never given specific direction to go down this road. We believe we've advanced a number of relationships that are going to help us move this along rather quickly, thanks to this direction.
Perfect. Thank you. I guess the other question I have, more specific, I guess, to the approach. I just want to make sure that it's clear and transparent. My concern is, yes, there's specific needs that we require, but we also have current business owners here that I don't want them to feel shorted, especially if it's going to be a similar business. So I appreciate we have a need for medical services. We have a need for a hotel, things that other developers aren't currently willing to provide at this point in time. But in saying that, if we're going to end up with another grocery store or liquor store or daycare, but there's incentives given to one group and not another, I could see that having some negative impact on our existing business owners. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe speak to that.
Yeah, important question. So just for clarity, Beaumont's not giving any incentives, right? The incentive is provided through the local through the federal government for the nations in order to be able to do that. If another business comes in, whether it's another grocery store, I don't think it's up to us to determine what comes in. We don't go out and say, we've got 4,000 pizza stores here, we're not going to allow another one, right? Like that's just the market playing out. So our job is to attract business. And depending on what the opportunities come back with, if there is an opportunity that comes back and says, hey, we've got that nation that wants to do this for a pizza store, you know, at that point we can vote it down. But this is a chance to go out and explore and say that we're open to this, bring us your ideas, and then we look at those ideas and we see how we go forward.
I guess a tail question to that is just, can we go with a more targeted approach? Would you be open to that in terms of services that we know we need?
Yeah, going with the, and I'll try to be careful how I answer this because it's a good question. Trying not to be the, how do I say this? Maybe I won't go down that route. Short answer, no. I don't think we should dictate what this is. We go out, we let administration say, we're interested, we'll come back and we'll review that. I think administration knows that our economic development strategy, they know what we want. They're going to lead with hotels. They're going to lead with medical centers. We've seen this before. And so if another option comes forward, then let's look at that and let's review it. It doesn't change administration's direction on what type of economic development we're looking to do. I think if we narrowed it down, we would miss out on opportunities we don't know. So if we narrow it down, it could be some industry that we're not aware of that a nation wanted to invest in. And because our motion says we only want a hotel or whatever, then that precludes it. So let's leave it open is my view. And then we evaluate it when it comes in.
Okay, perfect. I guess just last question, just in terms of anticipated costs to proceed with a motion like this, or would this simply just transition into the approach we're already taking with ECDAV? That's for
CEO Schwartz.
administration, sorry.
I don't see any out of budget costs associated with this. It's a process. It takes time. It's based on relationships. And as Councillor Munkoff-Swain said, there's a lot of great business ideas out there that we find that our Indigenous folks would like to do them off reserve. And that's where this urban reserve gives them a huge advantage.
Perfect, thank you. Again, Councillor Munkoff-Swain, appreciate the information you brought forward. Always open to more cogs in the wheel, as mentioned, in terms of business opportunities and development for our community, our city. So looking forward to what this may bring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook.
Mine is brief. I support this for all the reasons said. I think Councillor Penrod spoke to it eloquently as to why we should move forward with it, and appreciate the work that Councillor Munkoff-Swain has put into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll speak to it as well in support of the motion. We had the discussion with Chief Morin, gosh, almost 2 years ago now, and the concept was good then, it's still good now. We missed the boat with Enoch. I had a chance to do a medical facility and they chose elsewhere. This would put us on the map in Alberta for the first municipality to do something like this. It'll put us on the federal map, on the provincial map in terms of funding. There's a very good chance we'll go to the front of the line, in my personal opinion, on medical facility, if we can have this kind of a facility, a ground to put it on. So this ticks off all the reconciliation boxes that we're working on, as well as economic development. And another key thing to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, is that our economic development director, Jennifer Nysing, came from North Battleford, and she has extensive experience working with First Nations in North Battleford. So this gives her another tool to work with and get out there and get us into this marketplace and attract some business here that would otherwise not come here. So I'm very excited about this, and I think I see good things for Beaumont because of it. So having no further questions, no further comments, I'll ask, a closing statement, Sam?
Yeah, I'll just close by just wanted to acknowledge and thank a lot of Indigenous friends, elders, leaders who have given a lot of time to me as I have asked a lot of these questions. The overwhelming feedback from them, and I hope I know administration will take this, is that whether it's nations from Saskatchewan have been in this, I could give you 5 chiefs who would come out here tomorrow to talk through that. Their administration staff who have been through this recently, take advantage of that, that they want to see that these pop up in Alberta. And I know they're eagerly waiting to see what happens here tonight. And so there's a lot of experience out there. We don't need to recreate the wheel here. Let's lean on that. And so with that, I just say thank you. and the really important day for me here. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, for bringing it forward, much appreciated. With that, council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion on the screen. I'm very pleased that this motion carries unanimously, 7-0 in favor. Motion carries. Great work. Thank you. As I mentioned, the CEO update will be foregone. Oh, sorry. We have councillor inquiries first. We have one councillor inquiry this evening. Councillor Penrod, would you please make your inquiry? Your microphone is on.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. My inquiry is, please provide an update on the work of the Strategic Advisor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and any plans for reconvening or reconstituting the EDI Residents Advisory Committee. I may have the wrong name for what that was previously called, but I think you catch my drift there. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Any further councillor inquiries? I'm not aware of any. Seeing none. As I mentioned, CEO update will be sent to us from CEO Schwartz by email. I appreciate that. Any notice of motion this evening? I'm not aware of any. Seeing none. That brings us to the end of our agenda. It's been a long one. First one had a long one in a long time, so I'll be very brief. It's been a great first 7 months of the year. We now begin a 7-week summer break. So I want you all to enjoy 7 weeks, spend time with your family, your friends, do what you got to do to relax. I'm going to try and do that myself. I'm not good at it, but I'm going to try. But in the meantime, have a great summer. And most of all, importantly, have a very safe summer. We'll see you back on September 10th. Thank you, and we are adjourned at 10.